I know what you're thinking and know it's not what it looks like. Even though he does things like this and this, he is really just a good old nice guy. He just wants to open a school. He wants to teach people. He's one of the most powerful mages, but his magic is strange. Truly, truly strange. He is the disciple of the most powerful mage and people fear him. I see why. He finds the potential next Archmage to teach. Guess who it is? His master's daughter. She is really powerful, but because she's so powerful her heart can't contain it. Our protagonist devises a way to help her. He takes out her heart and adds seals so she can slowly ease into her power. He makes her a promise to make her the next Archmage. Yeah, I'd stare too. Our boy is just a good-hearted dude who is just misunderstood. Here is how the story goes. The world was plagued with hunger, war, climate change, and the depletion of resources. But a promise echoed through the chaos, vowing to end all suffering and bring forth a new era. As of that moment, a pivotal change was about to unfold, marking the beginning of a transformation that would reshape the fate of humanity. The ages of indifference were over. The time had come to step out of the shadows and take action, to no longer stand by as the world suffered. With a collective resolve, they decided to step forward and extend their help to those in need, offering a beacon of hope in the darkest times. As the representative of all mages, a figure emerged to take the lead, ready to guide the world towards a brighter future. Wihyok Jong, the Archmage, stood before the world, promising to bring about a change that would end the suffering and usher in a new age of prosperity. When humanity stood on the brink of destruction, the mages revealed themselves, ready to solve the problems that once seemed insurmountable. With a wave of magic, the Earth Mage began to mend the broken world, solving the once unsolvable problems that had plagued humanity. Mages from all corners of the world came forward, their powers combining to create a force that would change the course of history. The Earth Mage joined the Fire Mage, their magic weaving together to solve the problems that had once seemed impossible to overcome. With magic as their tool, the mages worked tirelessly, their combined efforts bringing about a change that the world had never seen before. After being saved by magic, the world began to heal, the scars of the past slowly fading away as a new era dawned. The world entered an unprecedented golden age, a time of peace and prosperity that had once been thought impossible. Wihyok Jong, the Archmage who led the mages to save the world and bestow magic to all, became the most admired, honored, and loved person in the world. Despite the newfound peace, Wihyok knew there were still many problems in the world that required magic, and he was ready to face them head-on. With the world still in need of magic, Wihyok realized he couldn't tackle everything alone. He needed allies, wise and righteous mages who could carry out his will and share the burden. Turning to Eugene, Wihyok made his plea clear. He needed help, someone to stand by his side and face the challenges ahead together. With a hint of pride and determination, Wihyok declared his ambition. As the world's greatest Archmage, he vowed to make Eugene the second greatest, a promise that carried the weight of their future. Wihyok asked for a promise, a commitment from Eugene to help him when the time came, sealing their bond with a question that hung in the air. Eugene responded with unwavering loyalty, promising to stand by Wihyok's side, ready to face whatever the future held. 26 years later, a scared woman called out for her master, her voice trembling with fear and desperation, setting a tense tone for what was to come. Her cries echoed through the air as she pleaded for help, sensing that something was terribly wrong, her fear palpable and urgent. Her master, gripped by fear, revealed his helplessness. She couldn't move her legs, couldn't feel anything, her desperation growing as she begged not to die young. A hand suddenly grabbed her, and she pleaded for another chance, her voice filled with desperation and fear, hoping against hope for a different outcome. Her plea was cut short, a stark reminder of the brutal reality they faced, leaving her words hanging in the air, unfinished and haunting. The realization hit hard. It was true. The rumors they had dismissed as mere urban legends were real, and the danger was more imminent than they had ever imagined. The truth was undeniable. There really was a monster hunting down mages, a terrifying force that mangled them with grotesque magic, turning their worst nightmares into reality. The gravity of the situation sank in. This was no childish tale, but a horrifying truth that threatened the very existence of mages, leaving them vulnerable and terrified. But amidst the chaos and fear, a chilling revelation emerged. The great Archmage Jongson, revered and powerful, had one fatal flaw: his abandoned disciple. And that disciple had a name that would send shivers down anyone's spine: Eugene. The air grew tense as the trembling man echoed through the darkness. He was there, pleading, warning not to come any closer, to stay back and speak from a distance. The plea turned into a desperate command, his voice cracking with fear. Don't take another step, don't come any closer, as if facing a monster straight out of a nightmare. A sudden shriek pierced the silence, a sound of pure terror that made the blood run cold. In that moment of sheer panic, he whispered, almost to himself, about how he had once believed anything was possible in their world, all because they had magic. But now, that belief was crumbling, shattered by the terrifying reality he was facing. I too would be running for my life seeing that. And then, a single word hung in the air, heavy with dread. That. The noise, the screams, the pleas, everything stopped, leaving an eerie calm that was almost worse than the chaos. In the darkness, voices trembled, unable to see anything, questioning if there was really someone there to save them. Suddenly, the sound of a door opening echoed through the silence. Could it be? The rescue team had finally arrived. Their days as slaves were over. Relief washed over them as they cried out in gratitude, thanking their saviors. But then, a pause, a hesitation. The voice trailed off, the gratitude turning into something else entirely. There you are. The victims were all in shock from being locked up in a confined space for so long. But thankfully, none of them were in critical condition. Looking at the mess, it was hard to process. This was not something one could get used to easily. To the best of their knowledge, there was only one mage who could do something like this. The scale of the situation was overwhelming. Detective Kim was called over. The victims were in shock from being confined, but something felt off about the situation. It was good to see a familiar face again. Laughter filled the air, but there was an underlying tension. The confinement might not have been the cause of their shock. Thanks were given for the hard work, but the feeling that something was amiss persisted. The victims were fine, none in critical condition, but the mystery deepened. Relief washed over as the victims' conditions were confirmed. They were fine, but the question remained, what had they been through? It was a relief, truly. The victims were foaming at the mouth and screaming the moment the door opened. It was absolute chaos, but at least they were alive. The scene was terrifying. The victims were foaming at the mouth, screaming, and in absolute chaos. The fear of torture and the worry of arriving too late were palpable. The mages had been kidnapping homeless people and runaway teenagers, forcing them to process magical materials in confinement. The cruelty was unimaginable. How could mages be so cruel? The victims were terrified, and the torment they endured was unfathomable. Apologies were offered, and pleas to undo the spell were made. Relax, it would all wear off by the next morning. Just sit still and think about what had been done. But suddenly, panic set in, and screams echoed. That made transportation easy. The situation was under control, but the tension remained. Aren't you going to read them their rights? There was a hope to see it like in the movies, but reality was different. Suppose you shouldn't judge a book by its cover. Eugene, sir, thank you so much for cooperating with us again. The situation was complex, but there was a sense of gratitude and resolution. With the gratitude still lingering in the air, the atmosphere shifted as a desperate plea echoed through the room. There was no need for such formalities, the detective assured, but the plea continued, heavy with urgency. Mages are responsible for the troubles caused by other mages, Eugene declared, a mix of frustration and determination in its tone. A call for help was extended, but it was hard not to judge when faced with such a striking presence. Rumors of a serial killer on the loose had been spreading, causing anxiety among the people. Eugene had been chasing leads, driven by the chilling descriptions of the killer's hideous appearance. The killer's brutality was described in gruesome detail, leaving victims mangled beyond recognition. The weight of the situation hung heavy in the air. This killer must be stopped before more innocent people get hurt, Eugene thought, a sense of urgency driving him forward. A plea for any clues about the criminal was made, the atmosphere tense with anticipation. As the conversation continued, he glanced at the time, realizing how late it had gotten. Feeling drained, the detective mentioned her exhaustion, but there was still a sense of duty that kept her going. Eugene revealed that he had been planning something for some time, a hint of determination in his voice. He offered something to the detective, a small gesture of appreciation for her cooperation. Confusion filled the air as Kim questioned what was being offered. With the formalities out of the way, MC bid farewell, a sense of finality in his voice. Kim responded in kind, a mutual understanding passing between them. A moment of silence followed, the weight of the situation sinking in. The detective wondered if the protagonist had any idea what people thought of him, a hint of concern in his voice. MC thoughts lingering on the complexities of the case. 30 years had passed since Archmage Zhang made the declaration that brought mages into our midst. Magic had become an essential part of our lives, transforming the world in ways no one could have imagined. Artificial rain was scheduled to fall in 30 minutes to maintain ideal atmospheric conditions. A reminder to take an umbrella was given, but there was still a sense of urgency. We still don't have enough mages, the voice declared, a hint of frustration in its tone. That's why we need your help, the voice continued, a sense of determination in its tone. The call for assistance was clear and urgent. Through structured education and our unique expertise, the voice declared, we will bring out your magical talents. The offer was made with confidence and conviction. We want you to become a mage and shine on the world stage. The voice concluded, a sense of hope and expectation in its tone. Isekai Choi and the leading experts in magical education are waiting for you. The invitation was extended, leaving the listener with a sense of anticipation and possibility. With the invitation to shine on the world stage still echoing, the scene shifted to a lively advertisement for Prime Mage Academy. Eugene's magic school promised to teach various spells for college exams, job interviews, and even starting a business, all at an affordable price. It was almost too good to be true, but the enthusiasm was contagious. Amidst the buzz of magical education, he pondered deeply about a promise made with a master. The weight of that commitment hung heavy in the air, hinting at a journey yet to unfold. The promise, a sacred vow, lingered in the mind of the speaker. Even if they couldn't be together, the determination to honor that promise was unwavering. It was a bittersweet resolve, filled with longing and duty. The world was full of problems that required the use of magic, but instead of using it for good, many chose to wield it for harm. The misuse of magic to hurt others and steal from them was a stark reality that needed addressing. Efforts were made to stop such atrocities whenever possible, but these were merely temporary solutions. The fundamental problem remained unresolved, a persistent thorn in the side of those who sought justice. There had to be a path forward. As the Archmage's disciple, the responsibility weighed heavily. What could be done to fulfill that role and make a lasting difference? The path ahead was unclear, but the determination to find it was steadfast. A group of students, their teacher urging them to stay close. The children, full of curiosity and energy, responded with a cheerful, "Yes, teacher." Their enthusiasm was palpable, a stark contrast to the weighty thoughts of the previous scene. The teacher's voice rang out, commenting on the lovely day. The sunny atmosphere seemed to lift the spirits, a brief respite from the heavier themes. The teacher suggested taking in the beautiful scenery around them. The students, however, were more curious about the sudden stop. Their teacher's instructions to look straight ahead and keep walking added a touch of mystery. The teacher's caution piqued the students' curiosity. Why were they stopping? What was there to see, or rather not to see? The tension built subtly, a hint of something more beneath the surface. The protagonist explained that this was a way to equip mages with wisdom, knowledge, goodness, and righteousness. The goal was to prepare them to go forth and serve the world. He then asked the teacher to take a look, adding a layer of intrigue. The focus shifted to a question about a child dreaming of becoming a mage. Learning magic during teenage years was said to build character, emotional maturity, creativity, and focus. The benefits were enticing, painting a picture of growth and development. He also mentioned lessons for beginners and hobbyists like homemakers. A sudden apology interrupted the flow and the speed of Usain Bolt. He concluded that one ought to be prudent in choosing a path for one's children. The problem, however, remained unresolved. What was the best path forward? As the teacher's words lingered, a sense of determination washed over the protagonist. The question of the best path forward still unanswered, he decided to take matters into his own hands. Standing in a seemingly deserted spot, he realized that not a single flyer had been handed out. People were too busy, walking too fast to even start a conversation. The protagonist couldn't help but feel a pang of frustration as he murmured about the situation, drawing curious glances from passersby who quickly averted their eyes, not wanting to make contact. An idea suddenly struck the protagonist like a bolt of lightning. He needed a way to grab everyone's attention, something that would make people stop and take notice. As the thought formed, a mischievous grin spread across his face. That was it, a great idea had finally come to mind. A strange gurgling sound echoed through the air, drawing the onlookers' attention. They couldn't help but be intrigued by the unusual noise. Their curiosity piqued. As they looked around, they noticed people trying to avoid staring at something, their eyes darting away quickly. They couldn't believe their eyes as they took in the sight before them. Good Lord, what was that thing? It was unlike anything they had ever seen, and it sent a shiver down their spine. The creature before them seemed to grow, its form expanding and elongating in a way that defied logic. It was as if it was determined to get bigger and longer, its presence becoming more imposing with each passing second. The protagonist realized that this bizarre spectacle might just be the solution to his problem. If he could use this to his advantage, it would certainly help him hand out more flyers. With a newfound sense of purpose, he set to work, determined to make the most of this unexpected opportunity. As he put the final touches on the flyers, the protagonist couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction. That should do it, he thought, admiring his handiwork. The flyers were ready, and he was confident that his plan would work. With a deep breath, the protagonist addressed the crowd that had gathered, his voice ringing out clear and strong. "Everyone," he called out, ready to make his announcement. "Let me teach you magic," the protagonist declared, his words hanging in the air. He went on to explain that he could turn the people into great mages, individuals who could contribute to making the world a better place. The crowd was not trying to hear none of that. The protagonist stretched, letting his words sink in. He knew that what he was offering was valuable, something that could truly make a difference in people's lives. Lessons for beginners and college applicants, all for an affordable price, the protagonist announced, the crowd erupting into a mix of excitement and fear. The reaction was overwhelming, a cacophony of voices filling the air. As the protagonist looked out at the sea of faces, he couldn't help but wonder why he hadn't thought of this before. It was basic marketing, giving people a spectacle and entertainment. The realization hit him like a ton of bricks, and he couldn't believe he hadn't considered it sooner. The protagonist's mind wandered back to a memory from his childhood, a time when his master had taken them to an amusement park. He remembered being impressed by a tall clown, the joy of the experience still fresh in his mind. It was a happy memory, one that brought a smile to his face. The protagonist realized that he could use magic to impress people, to create memorable experiences that would stay with them forever. That was another way to use magic for good, he thought, the idea filling them with a sense of purpose. As the protagonist stood there, lost in thought, a murmur ran through the crowd. "He's the serial killer," someone shouted, the words sending a chill through the air. "That's the sociopath cannibal mage who kills mages and civilians," another voice added, the fear palpable. The name Eugene hung in the air, the crowd's fear and excitement reaching a fever pitch. The protagonist couldn't believe what he was hearing, the accusations and fear swirling around them. A hushed woe escaped the lips of the crowd, the tension and anticipation building to a breaking point. The protagonist could feel the weight of his gaze, the fear and excitement mingling in a way that was almost tangible. The crowd's reaction was a mix of shock and awe, their faces a picture of disbelief and fear. As a man looked out at the crowd, he noticed some commotion outside the academy. Is that the infamous killer monster everyone's been talking about? He wondered, the thought sending a shiver down his spine. He stood frozen. A monstrous figure loomed before the academy, its grotesque form a stark contrast to the sacred halls of learning behind it. The creature seemed to sneer at the very idea of knowledge and purity, its presence a blight on the academy's reputation. It was Isekai Choi, the headmaster of Prime Mage Academy, a seasoned battle mage known for his incredible prowess. The crowd erupted in cheers, their fear momentarily forgotten. Whispers of awe rippled through the crowd as they beheld the headmaster's commanding presence. Some even considered transferring to his academy, while parents vowed to send their children there. The headmaster, however, had a different agenda promoting his academy. The headmaster pondered for a moment, wondering if he should have brought Sile along. But then he dismissed the thought, imagining how Sile's head might explode from a basic spell. The mental image was almost amusing. He realized he should have used a more impressive spell for greater visual impact. As he mused, the monster took advantage of his distraction, lunging towards him with a sinister grin. The headmaster quickly regained his composure and chastised the monster for casting dangerous spells in the middle of the city. He sighed in relief, noting that he was the only one hit by the monster's attack. The crowd gasped in shock, their eyes wide with disbelief. They had seen the MC skull get blown apart, yet he stood there perfectly fine. How was this possible? The headmaster turned his gaze towards the monster, his eyes filled with a mix of anger and disappointment. He accused the protagonist of being the serial killer who had been terrorizing the city. Isekai struggled against an invisible force, muffled protests escaping his mouth. The headmaster continued, expressing his initial doubts but how MC actions had confirmed its identity. The MC voice boomed with righteous fury as he condemned the headmaster actions. He couldn't believe that someone would use magic to harm innocent people, especially in such a brutal manner. He recounted how the crowd's fear and the screams of serial killer had confirmed his suspicions. Isekai had not only committed heinous crimes but had also disrupted the peace of the city. MC's voice dripped with contempt as he accused Isekai of being a vicious serial killer. He couldn't fathom the cruelty of using magic to blow up an innocent person's head without provocation. He questioned Isekai's use of magic, asking if this was how he had been taught to use such a precious gift. Iseok struggled, muffled cries escaping his bound mouth. The protagonist promised that the Iseok would face the consequences of his actions upon waking. With a wave of his hand, he rendered Iseok unconscious. The crowd watched in stunned silence as the once-praised headmaster lay motionless on the ground. MC turned to the crowd, his expression softening. He hoped that Iseok would reflect on his actions and find a way to make amends. He informed them that he had already called Detective Kim and reported the incident. He assured the crowd that they could finally breathe a little easier, the serial killer now in custody. The tension in the air began to dissipate, replaced by a sense of relief and gratitude. With the immediate threat neutralized, MC turned his attention back to promoting his academy. The crowd, however, couldn't have left any faster. The unsettling vibe from the earlier incident still hung in the air. People couldn't believe that such a horrifying creature had been walking around in broad daylight, and the thought sent shivers down their spines. The world suddenly felt a lot more dangerous, and whispers of magic disguises and hidden faces filled the room, with some even suggesting that the creature's true appearance was far more terrifying. Rumors began to spread like wildfire, with some claiming that the creature was once a disciple of the Archmage. The crowd's curiosity piqued, and they wondered if there was any truth to these whispers. Someone suggested asking a nearby figure about it, hoping to shed some light on the situation. As the lady's attention shifted, she noticed she seemed almost done with whatever she was doing. Kim called out to her, hoping to get some answers, but she seemed to be in a hurry, leaving the him in suspense. Suddenly, a voice rang out, reminding everyone that they were in the presence of the Archmage's very own daughter and disciple. The crowd fell silent, realizing the weight of the situation and the importance of the figure before them. A tense moment passed before she approached the boss, asking her to take a look at something. The boss took a glance and was taken aback by what she saw. She turned to them, asking if anyone knew the man in the image. They murmured among themselves, trying to recall any information about him. Someone spoke up, admitting that it sounded ridiculous, but she had heard a rumor that the man was once a disciple of Archmage Jong. The boss's expression darkened, hinting at the storm that was about to come. The boss acknowledged that the Archmage had many disciples, but the thought of some random mage pretending to be one was just too much. As she muttered the name Eugene, they could sense her frustration and anger building up. They watched in shock as the boss's reaction intensified. Someone muttered that she had no idea the boss actually knew him, and that the person who asked should have thought things through before speaking up. The person who had asked the question couldn't help but feel a sense of dread. They tentatively asked if the boss was mad at her, hoping to defuse the situation. Suddenly, there was a loud crash as the boss's phone hit the ground. They gasped, realizing that the boss's anger had gotten the better of her. The person who had asked the question couldn't help but feel a sense of guilt and fear. The boss turned to them, acknowledging that the man's appearance was indeed shocking, but destroying her phone wasn't the answer. She apologized, but they could sense that her mind was elsewhere. She muttered that there was no doubt about it. Decades may have passed, but she could tell it was him. A sudden recall of the boss with her father and Eugene. Muttering to herself that this was her chance to prove herself to her father. With a determined look, she was not going to fail. Back to this. The atmosphere was thick with tension as a voice let out a shocked exclamation, setting the stage for what was to come. Eugene, realizing the gravity of the situation, quickly apologized for the misunderstanding. He hadn't known that the person he was dealing with was the headmaster of a nearby academy. The headmaster, still shaken, tried to brush it off and asked Eugene to leave, needing some rest. Eugene admitted that promoting his own school in front of the headmasters wasn't the nicest move, but he argued that it didn't warrant being attacked with spells. He suggested that the headmaster could have just talked to him about it. The headmaster snapped back, saying he would have if Eugene looked like he'd listened to reason. Trying to defuse the situation, Kim suggested that Eugene should let her worry about the serial killer and focus on his new magic teaching business instead. She assured him she would call if she needed his help. Eugene agreed, saying he understood and would get going to promote his school somewhere else. The officers wished him good luck as he prepared to leave. As Eugene bid them a nice day, Kim couldn't help but feel anxious, wondering why she was so worried since Eugene wasn't a kid going off on his own. Eugene, determined to find a better spot, decided to try promoting his school in front of an elementary school this time. With a newfound sense of purpose, Eugene liked the sound of being called Mr. Eugene, ready to take on his next adventure. Success. The magic finally worked, and the excitement was cute. A young girl eagerly called out to her father, bursting with excitement as she showed off her newfound magical abilities. Her father acknowledged her achievement with a proud smile, reminding her that being his daughter meant having great potential, but that potential needed to be earned. He encouraged her not to be satisfied with just having talent, but to strive to do something worthy with it. With determination, she vowed to become someone worthy of her talent, someone who could make her father proud. She declared her ambition to become an Archmage, just like her father, her eyes sparkling with dreams of the future. Suddenly, she remembered her uncle Eugene and wanted to show him her new abilities, her excitement bubbling over. Her father's expression darkened as he mentioned her uncle Eugene, hinting at something unsettling. He described Eugene as a complete nutjob, his tone serious and wary. Eugene had a creepy reputation, turning people into mush with some weird magic no one had ever heard of, making him a rather infamous figure. Isekai couldn't shake the image of Eugene's creepy face from his mind, questioning if he was truly a disciple of Archmage Zhang. Ein explained that Eugene was indeed Archmage Zhang's disciple, taken in out of compassion as a war orphan, but his magic remained a mystery. Isekai admitted he lost to Eugene because he was taken by surprise, and he couldn't let that slide, especially with all the rumors circulating. This time, he came prepared, gathering the best battle mage graduates from his academy, determined to face Eugene again. Ein interrupted, saying she came for information about Eugene, not to listen to him ramble about his loss. She decided to leave, but Isekai insisted she stay, his tone firm and unyielding. A man pointed out her rudeness, reminding her that she was in his academy and should show some respect. He demanded that if they weren't going to help, they should at least be polite and apologize to Headmaster Choi, cooperating with them instead of causing trouble. She refused to cooperate, insisting she could handle things on her own and telling Isekai to let her go. Isekai questioned the point of offering her a seat at the table if she didn't want to dine with them, his frustration growing. A sudden shift in the atmosphere drew everyone's attention. The room fell silent, all eyes turning toward the door as they blocked it. The sound of the door being shut was about to get real. The air seemed to thicken, Isekai sweating bullets. The tension snapped like a rubber band as Ein's voice cut through the room, sharp and commanding. She didn't just suggest teaching the boys manners, she demanded it, her tone leaving no room for argument. The room seemed to shrink under the weight of his authority. The scene shifts to a shop. Someone let out a nervous laugh. It was a sound of relief, a release of the pent-up anxiety that had filled the room. The laughter was contagious, spreading like wildfire as the weight of the moment lifted ever so slightly. But the laughter quickly turned into a mix of hiccups and giggles, the stress of the encounter bubbling over. Someone muttered about the guy getting on his nerves, and another voice, calmer and more composed, tried to soothe the situation, urging him to just let it go. The voice cut through the laughter, reminding him that he wasn't alone. The room was filled with other people, and the noise was becoming a disturbance. The laughter died down, the reality of the situation sinking back in. But the moment of levity had passed, and the room settled into an uneasy quiet once more. The mood shifted as MC muttered about algorithms being scary, his mind tinged with frustration. He had come for research but had ended up wasting time watching videos instead. The irony wasn't lost on them, and a sigh of exasperation filled the air. He recalled Kim, suggesting that running campaigns on Instagram or YouTube might be more effective. The comment was met with a murmur of agreement, the topic shifting slightly as he tried to refocus. He declared it was time to focus, his voice filled with determination. He wasn't going to get sidetracked this time. But just as he was about to begin, someone tapped his shoulder. "Holy crap, what the hell?" she exclaimed, her earlier resolve forgotten. She muttered an apology, her attention drawn to the protagonist who had been so easily distracted. Who was that freaky-looking guy? She wondered, her eyes widening as she took in the sight before her. "It's fine," MC chimed in, though the unease was palpable. The realization of who he was sank in. She spoke up, her voice calm but firm. "There's someone who'd like to see you," she said, and if Eugene didn't mind, they'd like him to come with them for a moment. The request was polite but carried an undercurrent of urgency. A voice confirmed that Eugene was on his way and not causing any trouble. They were in the middle of the city, so it was unlikely he'd do anything strange. The assurance seemed to ease some of the tension, and the group prepared to move, promising to call back once they were in a cab. Curiosity got the better of him, and he asked for a hint about the person Eugene was going to see. But the answer was a firm no, they wanted it to be a surprise. As they waited, the guy couldn't help but comment on Eugene's appearance. Seriously, how can someone look like that? He wondered, his mind a mix of awe and unease. But it wasn't just his looks that were unsettling. Something about his vibes made people tense, like he could show his true colors at any moment. The group was on edge, ready to react if he did anything suspicious. He muttered about how he thought all he had to do was bring Eugene in. He hadn't realized how stressful and nerve-wracking the situation would be. The weight of the task was sinking in, and the pressure was getting to him. A voice cut through the tension, calling out Eugene's name. The single word carried a weight of its own, a reminder of the task at hand and the uncertainty of what was to come. As Eugene's name hung in the air, memories flooded back. He was 34 years old, a war orphan taken in by a powerful figure at the tender age of 4. Raised to be a mage, his life had been anything but ordinary. Once a senior researcher at the Magic Technology Research Foundation, he had vanished without a trace 14 years ago. The rumors were true, he had indeed been Archmage Zhang's disciple. Staring at an old photo, the lady wondered if this was what Eugene looked like as a boy. The transformation was staggering. How could such a cute boy turn into that hideous figure? Shaking off the thought, Ain commanded Huimyong and Yunhai to bring Eugene in while final preparations were made. Pause filled the air. The guy hesitantly asked what exactly was planned for Eugene once he was brought in. Apparently, Eugene had disappointed Ain's father on the day he went missing. The history between them was more complicated than it seemed. Eugene had been the favorite disciple, always by the father's side, but he had suddenly betrayed him and disappeared, only to resurface decades later. She wanted to see if Eugene had any intention of harming her father or his reputation. If he showed even the slightest hint of that, there would be consequences. The air grew heavier with each passing moment, the stakes higher than ever. She assured that she would handle things once Eugene was brought in. The focus now was on finding him and bringing him in. One of the listeners couldn't help but wonder what was going on with the protagonist. His gaze intense and unnerving. His stare was creeping her out, making it hard to breathe. The listener doubted Eugene would try anything in a place like this, but still the unease lingered. MC seemed to understand, a whisper agreement passing between them. He then asked if the two of them worked with Ain, catching her off guard. Before she could respond, she declared a change of plans. She was to subdue Eugene and bring him in. MC couldn't help but wonder why they couldn't have done that from the start. With a magic circle on his glove. The guy used blue magic that crushed down on MC. They were in trouble and they knew it. The original plan had been to bring Eugene in, but now everything was ruined. One of them couldn't help but ask if Eugene was dead, the fear evident in his voice. The other responded with a sudden outburst, cutting off Eugene's arm. The guy questioned why the arm was cut off, the shock of the situation setting in. The girl responded that he didn't know what it felt like to walk in front of Eugene, the creepy stares and reaching driving her nuts. The guy was left speechless, the gravity of the situation hitting them hard. She continued, explaining that Eugene had been staring at her from behind, reaching towards her like a creep. She had reacted instinctively, cutting off his arm. MC tried to lighten the mood, apologizing once more for startling them at the cafe. But the room stayed silent, the weight of what had just happened still hanging heavy. They couldn't help but think that maybe there were better ways to handle their feelings than lopping off someone's arm. Changing the subject, the girl brought up Eugene and what they should do if he decided to attack. Rumors started to fly about Eugene's past, how he'd taken down quite a few mages and was a former disciple of the Archmage. The room grew tense as they realized they might not be able to handle him. But Ain wasn't worried, explaining that Eugene was ultimately just a researcher. He might be talented, but he wasn't a fighter. She turned to Huimyong, reminding him that he was an elite bodyguard who had successfully protected high-profile executives from countless assassination attempts. Then she looked at Yunhai, a veteran mercenary who had held her own against terrorist mages in dangerous war zones. They weren't half-baked posers like Headmaster Choi. Ain had chosen them as partners because she trusted them, and she hoped that trust was mutual. She asked them to try and contain the damage if anything happened and to contact her right away. Suddenly, a scream echoed through the room, making everyone jump. The lady was squirming, the guy body feeling strange. They had no idea what was happening to him. All they could do was stare in shock, their mind racing with possibilities. MC gets hit quickly with a blue magic circle. And spoke up, asking if they were okay. But before they could answer, the lady shouted a warning, telling her to watch out. They didn't know how he did it, but Eugene kept regenerating no matter how many hits they landed. He broke through all their defensive spells as if they were nothing. They warned each other not to let him touch them, calling him a monster and a nut job. Just as they were about to give up hope, someone noticed Ain Zhang, wondering if she was there to bring the monster down. But before they could call out to her, she was gone, leaving them alone once more. She suggested they go somewhere else, anywhere but there. But he was frozen in place, unable to move as the weight of their situation settled over them. The room was crowded, watching as they left like how Goku does with Nimbus. They knew they had to do something, but what? They were trapped, with a monster on the loose and no way out. Panic started to set in as they realized they might not make it out alive. But just as they were about to give up hope, MC gasped, realizing that he wasn't imagining it. As they stumbled through the escape route, MC boomed out, calling out a name with excitement. It was clear he had been waiting a long time, and the sheer growth since they last met was impossible to ignore. He continued, nostalgia dripping from every word. It had been 14 years, and Ein was now 22. He identified himself as Uncle Eugene, clearly expecting recognition. Eugene commented on the hat, noting its origin from his master, who was her father. He had always believed in her potential to become a great mage one day. But then her tone shifted, questioning why her people had been harmed. Eugene admitted to a mistake during their first meeting, one that apparently didn't sit well with his associates. They had reacted violently, casting lethal spells at him. Fearful of collateral damage, Eugene had restrained them. He wasn't interested in the details of what had happened, he just knew he needed to act. Ein confessed that she had been looking for an excuse to fight, trying to justify her actions. But seeing the other person's condition, she realized how broken they were. It was clear that a fight might be necessary after all. She concluded that she didn't need an excuse to confront him. The situation was justification enough. She accused him of harming her employees, using his connection to the Archmage, his father, to cause trouble. This was why she had to defeat them. It was personal now, and she wasn't going to hold back. This fight would prove that she deserved to be at his father's side, no matter what. And with that, she added one more thing, her magic dripping with intensity. It was clear that she wants blood. With an explosive green dash. She declared that he shouldn't talk to her as if they were close. The fight was on, and it was clear that this was far from over. The atmosphere was thick with tension as a voice boomed, declaring the situation utterly unacceptable. The frustration grew, with someone pointing out how she had humiliated not just an individual, but the entire academy, even the headmaster. The fact that she was the Archmage's daughter didn't seem to matter one bit. The room was filled with a mix of anger and resignation. He insisted that the arrogant brat needed to be put in her place, while Headmaster cautiously suggested it might be best to just let it go. A reminder was thrown into the mix, highlighting that she wasn't just any ordinary student. She was the daughter of the Wihyok Jong himself, the world's greatest Archmage. And with that lineage came more than just money. He recounted a past experience, remembering a time when he had ended up in her group during a high-stakes operation to take down a criminal mage syndicate. The memory was vivid, the first time in his career as a mage where he felt utterly insignificant and pathetic. The power gap was undeniable. She was on a whole other level, making it impossible to even consider himself her equal. That's why when she mocked them the other day, he couldn't utter a single word in response. The conversation took a turn, imagining a scenario where every battle mage in the academy, including himself, were to attack her all at once. Even in that hypothetical situation, the conclusion was grim. He didn't think they'd be able to lay a finger on her. The weight of the conversation settled in as the scene shifts to the battle. Ein's crazy powerful magic putting in work. The protagonist's face still looking scary. The atmosphere was charged, Ein effortless using magic. Then, out of nowhere, MC voice cut through the tension, calling out Ein's name. It was like when your mom uses your full name, you just know something's about to go down. He tried to play it cool, reminding Ein that he was her uncle and she wasn't the type to throw tantrums. But Ein wasn't having it. Her response was sharp, cutting through the air like a knife. The word traitor hung between them, a bitter accusation that seemed to echo in the silence. Ein's voice was cold, her words laced with betrayal. She refused to acknowledge him as her uncle, the title dripping with venom. The air between them crackled with tension, like a storm ready to break. She wasn't done. Ein's voice trembled with emotion as she accused him of turning his back on her father, of disappearing when it mattered most. And now, after all this time, he had the nerve to come back and drag her father's name through the mud. She declared herself her father's true disciple, her words ringing with conviction. The tension reached its peak as Ein vowed to punish him for his betrayal. The air was electric, the kind of moment that makes you lean in and whisper, "Oh snap, it's about to go down." The protagonist seemed taken aback, the word traitor hanging between them like a question mark. It was clear he wasn't expecting this level of hostility. He tried to reason with her, asking if he had ever done anything to hurt her. He pointed out that it had been at least a dozen years since they last saw each other, so why was she suddenly blasting him with attack spells? The confusion in his voice was palpable, but Ein's expression remained steely, her resolve unwavering. She snapped back, acknowledging his confusion but not backing down. She knew he still couldn't use magic, and that seemed to fuel her frustration even more. She pressed further, asking what her father, the great Archmage, had told him. All she could do was admit that she had been told to wait, but that wasn't enough for her. She knew other prodigies had already started their magical training at a much younger age, and the unfairness of it all was getting to her. He could see the desperation in her eyes as she confessed her fears. If she couldn't become a mage, her father would be beyond disappointed. The weight of that expectation was crushing her. But he wasn't about to let her spiral. He reassured her, reminding her that she was the daughter of the greatest Archmage in the world. Her father loved her more than anything, and that had to count for something. He promised her that they would figure something out together. They would turn her into an incredible mage, just like her dad. She just needed to trust him. He told her that once she was able to use magic, he would teach her everything she wanted to know. She would be so good at it that it would shock her father. The promise hung in the air, a lifeline for her to hold on to. She fell silent, the weight of his words sinking in. The tension between them was palpable, but there was a flicker of hope in her eyes. Finally, she nodded, accepting his promise. It was a small step, but it was something. They were in this together now. He apologized, his voice softening. He knew he couldn't fix everything right away, but he wanted her to know that he was there for her. Meanwhile, Ayn couldn't help but reflect on the battle. She had blasted him with every spell she knew, but nothing seemed to work. He was like a monster, unstoppable and unyielding. She wondered if it was even possible to defeat him. The thought was daunting, but she couldn't shake the feeling that there had to be a way. A realization dawned on her. She began to understand the gravity of the situation, the true nature of the battle she was up against. With a sigh, she muttered her frustration. She knew what she had to do, but the road ahead was anything but easy. She cast too many spells at once, her frustration mounting. She needed to calm down and think clearly. Eugene's overconfidence in his regeneration skill was baffling, yet she couldn't help but wonder how he was doing it. He wasn't even responding to her attacks, as if he could handle anything she threw at him. But she knew better. If you weren't an Archmage, there was only so much magic you could use. There were plenty of ways to defeat someone who used regeneration spells. She just needed to calm down and think. But before she could finish her thought, a sharp pain interrupted her. Suddenly, it all made sense. He was sorry, he had totally forgotten. He was just so happy to see her. Oh, little Ayn. She wanted to show him all the spells she had learned while he had been away. Didn't she? She had been practicing, wanting to show him what an incredible mage she had become without his help. He was really impressed. He couldn't imagine how hard she must have worked to master all these different spells and become so proficient. It must have taken a lot of hard work. Her dad must be so proud of her. Well done, Ayn. Yes, that was his eldest daughter. This was incredible. She had been accepted to magic school as the top incoming student only a year after she learned to use magic. That was the least she would have to do if she wanted to become the best mage among his disciples. She promised to continue working hard. He wanted her to continue working hard so he could be as proud of her as he was of Eugene. With his father's words echoing in her mind, she vowed to herself to be just like her uncle Eugene. She studied day and night, never letting magic out of her thoughts, determined to make him proud. Her dedication was unwavering, each spell and incantation bringing her one step closer to her goal. She risked her life to hone her skills and build a career, her father's praise fueling her every move. Her father always praised her effort and achievements, but not once did he call her his most treasured disciple. The words stung, but she pushed on, her resolve unbroken. Her uncle Eugene, who supposedly disappointed her father before he left, was still her father's most treasured disciple. The irony was not lost on her, but she used it as fuel to work even harder. And now, that very same person was telling her to actively praise her students' efforts and achievements, to be detailed in her compliments. She couldn't help but feel a sense of irony. MC learned all about encouraging students while preparing to open his school. Every day was a new lesson, and he never knew what might come in handy. He couldn't help but chuckle at the thought, finding humor in the situation. That should make her feel better now, he thought, a small smile playing on his lips. But the person she admired most was treating everything she ever did as if it were some kind of talent show. The realization hit her hard, and she felt a pang of disappointment. She took a deep breath and started popping pills. She took all the pills at once, a desperate attempt to numb the pain and confusion she was feeling. She waited, her mind racing with thoughts and emotions, unsure of what would happen next. She felt as if her life was more of a talent show than a journey of hard work and dedication. The thought was bitter, but she couldn't shake it off. Fine, she thought, a sense of resignation washing over her. Since he was kind enough to watch her little presentation, she would play along for now. As she resigned to play along, a sudden exclamation of surprise echoed. She challenged him, questioning if his regeneration spell could handle what was coming next. Chaos erupted as panic scream filled the air, followed by frantic warnings to calm down, the tension escalating rapidly. Amidst the chaos, MC murmured in awe, the weight of the situation sinking in. The realization hit him she had done it. She had reached the highest level of magic, mastering third circle spells. Pride swelled in his heart. She must have worked incredibly hard to get this good, and it showed. The weight of her achievement hanging in the air, literally. The intensity of the moment getting deadly as her massive spell formed. But just as quickly, MC piped up, urging her to hear him out, the tension subtly shifting once more. Curiosity piqued as he wondered what would come next. As Ein leaned in, the protagonist dropped some serious knowledge about tweaking the manual control circuit of the third circle spell, leaving everyone wondering if this was about to get real. Then came the suggestion to tweak the mana distribution ratio, and you could practically see the gears turning in everyone's heads. But just as quickly, the mood shifted with a sharp critique about the complexity of the circuit connections, leaving the room buzzing with a mix of confusion and curiosity. The tension was palpable as they pondered aloud whether they should be happy they survived or sad that they were all in deep trouble. Just when it seemed like things couldn't get any more intense, MC dropped another bombshell, suggesting a change in the timing of the pivot foot for the high-speed movement spell used earlier. The room erupted as Ein couldn't believe what she was hearing, shouting about old habits dying hard and the frustration of it all. Ein stammered, trying to figure out what was going wrong, but it was clear she still didn't understand the mistake she had made. The frustration was palpable as she finally let it all out, complaining about how every tiny mistake was pointed out in excruciating detail, no matter where she was. It was a raw moment, and everyone in the room could feel the weight of the words. She brought up a painful memory, recalling a time when they baked cookies for their dad's birthday, only to have them criticized for being slightly burnt and made with the wrong type of flour. The room was silent, everyone feeling the weight of the speaker's embarrassment and frustration. She was filled with emotion as she begged the MC to stop meddling where he wasn't wanted and to stop patting himself on the back for it. She huffed and puffed, trying to calm down. But then, in a moment of levity, the lady commented on how cute it was that Ein had baked cookies for her dad. The room was growing silent. Just when it seemed like things couldn't get any more intense, MC suddenly remembered something important and offered to undo the spell. Ein took a moment to reflect, wondering what had gotten into her and why she had shouted like that. MC apologized for what he had done earlier. The mood shifted. MC blurted out, asking Ein when she started using magic, catching everyone off guard. Ein's dad and MC had apparently worked really hard to help her use magic, or so he claimed. It turned out that Ein had started using magic the day after he left. The revelation hit like a ton of bricks, and he couldn't help but exclaim in surprise. MC processing the new information and the sudden shift in the conversation. The guy exclaimed about his face, wondering if it was back to normal. The girl quickly reassured him, saying he was as ugly as ever. The tension was broken, and Ein called out for Huimyong and Yunhai, saying they were done there and it was time to go. As they prepared to leave, she addressed Uncle Eugene, saying she didn't know what he had been up to. She continued, warning Uncle Eugene that there were a lot of mages after him. She said she was sure he knew what he was doing, but the warning was clear. She asked Uncle Eugene to try to avoid harming their father's reputation more than he already had. The request hung heavy in the air. As a final note, she told Uncle Eugene not to bother going back to her father. The message was clear and final. She said that her father and her felt the same way, that there was no place for Uncle Eugene in their hearts anymore. The words were harsh, but they seemed necessary. With a final goodbye, she turned to leave. Suddenly, she called out to Uncle Eugene, telling him to come with them. The offer hung in the air, a lifeline in the tense situation. She told Uncle Eugene to tell her where he wanted to go, and she would drop him off. The offer was genuine, a chance for him to leave the tense situation behind. As an afterthought, she handed Uncle Eugene something, saying it was her business card. The gesture was unexpected but appreciated. She told Uncle Eugene to call the number on the card if he ran into any problems. She made it clear that she was only giving it to him so he wouldn't ask her father for help. With the message delivered, the tone shifted to a stern warning. She made it clear that the call button was not a hotline for casual chats. Only in case of an absolute emergency should Uncle Eugene even think about dialing that number. Then, a simple sound of confusion escaped, as if the weight of the situation had just hit. The question came, laced with disbelief. Had he actually done something? The response was a weak echo, a whisper of confusion, as if the reality was too much to grasp. Suddenly, the protagonist's Mortal Kombat fatality her. Disbelief echoed through the room. Couldn't be. It just couldn't be possible. Silence fell heavy and thick. He had tried, oh how he had tried to understand what had been done. The pieces just weren't fitting together. Desperation crept in. He wanted to believe, needed to believe. There had to be a reason, an explanation that made sense of it all. A chasm of unspoken words and unresolved feelings. He clung to the hope that there was a reason, a justification for it all. And then, a single word, a title, a name. Master. But what would come next? The anticipation was almost too much to bear. Then, a single dot appeared, hanging in the air like a tiny star in the vast darkness. It was small, almost insignificant, but it was something. Friedrich was absolutely losing it, screaming his head off like he'd just seen a ghost or something. Dude was not holding back, and it was clear something had seriously rattled him. Wihiak wasn't having any of it, though. He shot back with a chill vibe, telling Friedrich to dial it down a notch. Like, seriously. No one needed their eardrums blown out over whatever drama was unfolding. Then things got real. Friedrich was called out directly, and the tension spiked. The idea of teaching magic to humans was thrown on the table, and it was like someone had just dropped a bombshell. Humans were being called inferior, and suddenly centuries of hiding made a whole lot of sense. The argument kept rolling, with him pointing out how humans couldn't even handle their basic knowledge, let alone magic. It was a full-on roast session, and the vibes were not good. He wasn't buying it, though. He'd signed up for a cause thinking mages would lead humanity, not hand out magic like it was candy. The betrayal was real, and he was not here for it. Then came the clapback. Wihiak shut that noise down real quick, telling him to get his facts straight. The mic drop moment arrived. Turns out, mages are humans too, and that little fact seemed to hang in the air like a truth bomb no one saw coming. The conversation took a turn. Magic had been stuck in the past because mages had been hiding for ages. Revealing magic to the rest of humanity wasn't about saving anyone, it was about finding a way to live together. Coexistence was the new buzzword, and it was either revolutionary or totally naive. Coexistence? That word just hung there, heavy with implications. No one was quite sure where this was going, but it felt big. Then the threat. A single wave of a hand could snuff out lives like it was nothing. The power flex was real, and suddenly the stakes felt a lot higher. The question lingered: if humans were that weak, how could anyone talk about coexistence? Friedrich was left with a challenge. If he didn't trust the plan, he could just wait and see. But the way it was said made it clear this wasn't just a suggestion. It was a test. But the way it was said made it clear this wasn't just a suggestion. It was a test. Wihiak echoed with a prophecy, declaring that times would change, and with them, the mages. He hinted at a future where even the lowliest of worms, those looked down upon, could rise to surpass a great mage like Friedrich. But that was a tale for another time, leaving Friedrich with a sense of foreboding. Silence hung in the air, and damn is Friedrich ugly as hell. Wihiak, cold and commanding, declaring that Friedrich would pay the price for defying an Archmage. The scene shifts to sleepy Ein. A voice, reminiscing about the past, hinting at a story yet to be told, mentioned Ein, who had followed them around everywhere. Suddenly, the tone shifted, acknowledging that Ein was now awake and present. Ein, disoriented and confused, wondered where he was. The voice asked how her felt, the concern laced with a hint of urgency. Ein let out a soft groan, her surroundings coming into focus. MC explained that she was in her uncle's correction, Principal Eugene's school. Ein, still confused, repeated the word school, as if trying to make sense of it. Principal Eugene excitedly declared that he was opening an academy for magic. Eugene continued, explaining that he was swamped with work, needing to finish the interior and find students before the academy could open. Ein, still processing everything, noted that her heart felt fine. She wondered if Eugene had put it back using his weird magic after pulling it out. Still reeling from the heart incident, Ein was caught off guard as a voice interrupted, surprised to find her and Eugene in a cozy little chat, especially with the guy who literally pulled out her heart. Ein, flustered, shot back, denying any cozy vibes, but the damage was done. The guy dropping a bombshell. Principal Eugene, it seemed, knew about Ein's heart problems all along. Ein's mind raced, connecting the dots. The heart incident, the weird magic, the cozy chat, it all started to make a twisted kind of sense. The guy confirmed it. Eugene pulled out Ein's heart to examine it, to understand the condition that had been plaguing her. Ein had used a lot of powerful spells that day, pushing her heart to the limit. The guy explained that her heart was overworked, leading to a cardiogenic shock. Ein processed the information, realizing the severity of her condition. Eugene had saved her, literally carrying them all to safety. The weight of the situation hung in the air, Ein absorbing the reality of his heart condition and Eugene's intervention. The guy added that they couldn't go to a hospital since Ein's heart issue was confidential. Eugene had taken the responsibility upon himself. Ein apologized, not wanting to cause any more trouble. MC stood there, the weight of the revelation settling in. Eugene called out Ein's name, snapping her back. There was something important he needed to tell her. Ein looked at Eugene, curiosity piqued. What could be so important after everything that had just happened? Eugene emphasized the gravity of the situation. It was important, something Ein needed to hear. Ein then turned to Huimyong and Yunhai, telling them to take the rest of the day off. As Huimyong and Yunhai left, one of them commented on how the boss puts up with Eugene, hinting at a deeper history and dynamic between them. The other mused that maybe growing up with Eugene's creepy face around messed with the boss's emotional development, making her prickly attitude make sense. After that, the girl couldn't believe that the boss was willing to sit with someone who had ripped her heart out. She wondered what was in his hand, and it turned out to be a flyer from the school. The skepticism continued as they questioned whether he actually wanted to teach. The idea of him teaching terrifying magic with his creepy face seemed absurd. Despite the doubts, they admitted his abilities were impressive. He kept regenerating and broke through defenses effortlessly. They wished they knew how to do such things, complaining that the teachers never shared the good stuff, keeping it all for themselves. Perhaps he wanted to talk to the boss and get her to promote his school. That seemed to make sense to them. A slight bump. The guy apologized for bumping into another person, who responded with a sharp remark to watch where he was going. The person paused and recognized the other from YouTube, identifying them as the mages working with Ein Zhong, the Archmage's daughter. The mages acknowledged their popularity made it hard to go anywhere. They confirmed their identity, leaving the other person at a loss for words. The person asked if they had met before, expressing surprise that young people would recognize him. He revealed that he was like a brother to Ein's father, which practically made him Ein's uncle. Back to MC and Ein's. She asked what he wanted to tell her, shifting the focus to their intentions. He mentioned Ein, hinting at a deeper connection and concern. He asked if using magic put a strain on her heart, and whether Ein's father had told her that. She acknowledged that there was no point in hiding it and confirmed that using magic indeed strained the heart. Realizing the cost of her power, she sighed, knowing her time was running out. The strain on her heart was too much, and she might not have long left. She couldn't help but feel the irony. Fate was cruel, handing her such an extraordinary talent from her father, only for it to be her undoing. She had this ridiculously rare condition called mana that built up stress on her heart. The doctors said it would eventually cause her heart to burst, killing her. A bitter laugh escaped him. Magic allergy? Huh? Who would have thought such a thing could be her downfall? She confronted, asking if that was why her heart was torn out, driven by curiosity. She said that if that was all he wanted to talk about, she would be leaving. She had a ton of things to do too. Suddenly, MC grabbed her, and she looked up, surprised. There were many important jobs in the world that helped people besides being a mage. She didn't have to live on borrowed time. She could always find other work where people needed her. She didn't have to live as a mage on borrowed time. He offered to help. She told him to get his hand off her, saying he crossed the line. She had told him there was no place for him in her heart. That meant he had no right to meddle in her life. This was her life, and this was the gift she got from her father. It was her fault for being born with this ridiculous condition, and it was her problem to deal with. But she wasn't going to let this condition define her. She had a dream, a burning desire to become a mage, no matter what. Being the daughter of an archmage, she felt that if the only option left was to live an ordinary life, she would rather not live at all. So, starting a magic academy was the perfect fit for her. It suited her ambitions and her desire to prove herself. But not everyone was supportive. Some people thought she should stop wasting time and focus on students who would actually pay tuition to listen to her. Despite the doubts, she was determined to make her dream a reality. MC was dealing with his own struggles. He had a secret to share, something that was weighing heavily on his mind. And then had a phone call. It was Yunhai on the other end of the line. Ein could sense something was off with her voice carrying a tone of urgency and distress. Without hesitation, she assured her that she would be there right away, urging her to hang in there until she arrived. She quickly excused herself, explaining that something urgent had come up and she had to go. He couldn't help but wonder if he should have told her sooner, if it would have made a difference. But now wasn't the time for regrets. This simulation had failed too, and he needed to focus on the present. Despite all the medical spells they knew, there was no way to stop the rejection that occurred when a mage's heart was transplanted into a person who was born unable to accept mana. If they could solve this issue, it would be possible to create more mages with integrity and wisdom. But the premise of the simulation itself was too extreme, and they needed to find another way. But as they pondered alternatives, the weight of Ain's potential became undeniable. Barely 8 years old, she possessed an unheard-of concentration of mana. The question hung heavy in the air: why would anyone consider transplanting a heart into such a powerful young girl? The answer was simple yet profound. Ain was family, a daughter, a niece, someone who deserved the best. But gifting her mana would undermine the very essence of their struggle. It would mean she was living on borrowed time, a fate no one wanted for her. The idea was shelved for the moment, but not forgotten. There had to be a better way, a solution that didn't involve such extreme measures. They needed time to think, to find a path that wouldn't leave Ain dependent on someone else's power. Ain wouldn't have given up her magic, not even if she knew the truth. Her determination was unwavering, a trait that both inspired and concerned those around her. The dilemma gnawed at him. Should he have stopped her by force? Should he have taken drastic measures to prevent her from using magic? The regret was palpable, the weight of their decisions heavy. This situation had only arisen because of past choices, choices that now seemed impossible to undo. There was nothing he could do now but face the consequences. The path forward was unclear, but he had to keep moving, hoping for a solution that didn't yet exist. Silence fell as he grappled with his thoughts, the weight of his decisions pressing down on him. A sudden chime broke the silence. The sound of a doorbell echoed through the room, a stark contrast to the heavy thoughts that had filled the space moments before. Who could it be? Curiosity piqued. He moved towards the door, wondering who would be visiting at such a time. Meanwhile, Ain stood there, her features familiar yet different. The hair and eye color were reminiscent of someone they knew, but the resemblance ended there. But then there was the hat, a detail that couldn't be ignored. It was a small thing, but it carried a weight of its own, hinting at a connection that went deeper than appearances. That hat, though, it was a whole mood, dragging up memories like an old playlist on shuffle. Standing there, feeling dwarfed by his presence, it hit hard this guy was the real deal. Turns out, this legend was once his father's right-hand man, back in the day. But then, plot twist, he went full villain and wrecked several cities, betraying everything they stood for. All these old memories flooding back? Yeah, not exactly a vibe. Honestly, it was all making him feel a little sick. The weight of the past hung heavy, but there was no time to dwell. Things were about to get real. There they were, weak and barely holding it together. He couldn't help but wonder why they were even around. They were so weak, it was almost embarrassing to have them as errand runners. One of them wheezed out a warning, urging her to run. Only the Archmage could stop the chaos unfolding. Apologies were thrown in, mixed with regret for calling her there, but the terror was too real. She wasn't having it. Sending them to the hospital was the least she could do for everything they'd been through. They were shocked. What just happened? Fried, you absolute menace. Sorry, too late for that now. Time was up. He'd given enough of it, and now it was his turn to get some help. A visit to her father was long overdue. It had been a while, and showing up empty-handed just wouldn't do. This was it, the moment everything had been leading to. What would happen next? Well, Friedrich had a plan, and it was as dramatic as it gets. He figured bringing his daughter's head might just spice up their 30-year reunion. Talk about a family reunion gone wrong. Ain wasn't having it, though. She pointed out that for someone who claims to be her father's old friend, Friedrich didn't seem to know his tastes at all. Ain's loyalty to the Archmage was unwavering, and she made it clear that this was where she would fight as his most loyal disciple. Ain's warning was crystal clear. Friedrich would be turned away at the gate, no questions asked. There was no way he was getting anywhere near her father that day. The stage was set, and the drama was just getting started. With Ain's warning still ringing in his ears, Friedrich knew he had to act fast. The stakes were high, and time was running out. Someone urgently called out to hurry, setting the tone for what was about to unfold. Confusion took over as voices clamored, wondering what was going on. It turned out there were emergency patients who had magically appeared out of nowhere, adding a layer of urgency to the already tense situation. The scene was chaotic as the patients were losing blood rapidly. Medical staff sprang into action, shouting orders to move them to the resuscitation room, their voices filled with desperation and urgency. Amidst the chaos, someone mentioned having asked the public relations team for help, hinting at a larger plan or strategy in play. The PR team had promised to put together a simple guide to get started with promoting the business on social media. It seemed like a good idea at the time, but the situation was quickly spiraling out of control. Kim, who suggested the idea, felt a weight of responsibility. She thought she should check on the situation, fearing it might cause more trouble than anticipated. The intensity of the situation was overwhelming, almost making them feel sick. The atmosphere was thick with tension, and the person at the center of it all looked even creepier when depressed. She wondered what could have made him so upset. Hesitantly, she called out to him, trying to get his attention and figure out what was going on. He thanked her for her help but revealed he was thinking of dropping the school idea altogether. The sudden change of heart left her puzzled, wondering what had caused this shift. He shared a story about a kid who did everything she could to achieve her dream, even to the point of hurting herself. It was a tale of determination and sacrifice, but it took a dark turn. Instead of helping her chase the dream, he admitted to telling her to give up, ultimately hurting her more. The weight of his words and actions seemed to crush her. He confessed to sticking his nose where it didn't belong and failing to understand how others felt. The realization that someone like him couldn't become a teacher was crushing, leaving him in a state of deep reflection. In the end, he concluded that he didn't think he was cut out for it. The finality of his words hung heavy in the air, leaving a sense of unresolved tension and a hint of what might come next. The weight of his words still lingered, but the atmosphere quickly shifted as Kim, declaring that there was something she needed to tell Eugene. She continued, sharing that as a policewoman, there were certain things she experienced quite often, almost routinely. The tone suggested a mix of frustration and determination, hinting at the challenges she faced regularly. She recalled a time when she had to break down a door to save a victim, only to have the victim demand compensation for the door. The absurdity of the situation was almost comical, yet it highlighted the unexpected hurdles of her job. Another memory surfaced of rescuing someone about to jump off a bridge, only to be met with a slap and a declaration that they didn't want to be saved. The irony of the situation was palpable, underscoring the complex emotions involved in her line of work. She reflected on how many people didn't recognize the danger they were in or tried their best to ignore it. It was a sobering thought, emphasizing the struggles of those who tried to help. Despite the challenges, she affirmed that her job was to save people like them, even if they didn't realize they needed saving. The resolve in her voice was unwavering, setting the stage for her next point. A brief pause followed, allowing the weight of her words to sink in. She then turned her attention to Eugene, suggesting that if he had decided to become someone in trouble who deliberately ignored the danger they were in, he should tell them about the danger and work with them to find a way through it together. The advice was heartfelt and practical, aimed at guiding Eugene. She concluded by asking if that wasn't the job of a teacher, implying that guiding and supporting others through their struggles was a noble and necessary task. She admitted that it was what she wanted to do but confessed that she couldn't find a way, yet she believed there must be a way. The vulnerability in her words added a layer of depth to her character, making her struggles relatable. Shifting gears, she reminded everyone that they lived in a world with magic, hinting at the possibilities and wonders that existed alongside the challenges. The reminder was almost hopeful, suggesting that magic could offer solutions. She urged him to keep trying, inviting him to join her on the great path of magic. The call to action was inspiring, ending the scene on a note of determination and unity. The moment hung in the air, filled with a sense of possibility and resolve. Back to Friedrich getting on Ein's ass. With shades on and one hand in pocket, magic surged. As he released the magic, the atmosphere was charged with fire. Multiple first circle spells were being cast, their energy crackling in the air like a Gen Z influencer about to drop the latest tea. The spells wove through the atmosphere, their magic intertwining and building upon each other, creating a spectacle of arcane energy that left everyone in awe. The echoes of the spells still lingering in the air like the aftertaste of a perfectly crafted meme. The world around them seemed to shift, the very fabric of reality bending to the will of the magic that had just been unleashed. In the midst of this transformation, ultra-steel beams unleashed. The determination to overcome them burned brighter than ever. They are just spamming magic spells at this point, like it's jump force. Mana blade for Ein. And finally she slashes down with her blade on the barrier. But Friedrich effortlessly not budging. And boom, he sends her ass flying. But her pillows probably saved her. The journey was far from over, and she calls out magic once more. Friedrich just chilling. And whoa, a big-ass earth spell. The spell slams down on Friedrich. And with it, the weight of expectations and the burden of proving oneself worthy. Most mages could only dream of wielding such a vast array of elements and spells, a testament to the extraordinary potential that lay within her. Not only that, but the ability to weave those spells together with an overwhelming amount of mana that could literally move mountains was a sight to behold. Such prowess was indeed worthy of Zhang's name, a compliment that carried the weight of high expectations and a hint of playful teasing. However, the bar was set high, and the spells displayed, though impressive, were not quite enough to meet the lofty standards. The time for a talent show was over, and the real test was about to begin, leaving a sense of anticipation hanging in the air. The mention of the third circle sent a ripple of tension through the scene, a challenge that would push the boundaries of skill and determination. In the quiet that followed, she summons a spirit bomb. She unleashes the red-flamed spirit bomb. She echoed with finality, declaring that it was all over. She continued, revealing that she had used the third circle spell, pushing her magic to the absolute limit. With a sense of resignation, she admitted that this was as far as she could go, warning that even the slightest attempt to cast another spell would be disastrous. She confessed that her heart would burst if she dared to cast another spell. It was over. Both her magic and her life were spent, leaving her with nothing but the echoes of her final battle. In a moment of reflection, she hoped that her final battle and struggle would mean something. Friedrich suddenly interrupted, calling out to her as Kid, and leaving her stunned. He firmly told her to go home, leaving the exhausted mage in a state of confusion and disbelief. He revealed that he had heard about Ui Hyok's child being a mage and had been excited to see the results of all his efforts. However, all he saw was some fancy, overblown spells with nothing behind them, and a sloppily stitched-together spell with 3 circles, which was unbelievable. He expressed his disappointment, stating that this was what Ui Hyok's flesh and blood had turned out to be, and he was actually starting to feel sorry for Ui Hyok. He continued, saying that he would be doing Ui Hyok a favor if he killed his opponent and got rid of his mess for him. He concluded that he couldn't kill his opponent. He wasn't going to do anything that benefited Ui Hyok. He remarked that he should have known better, considering the sorry state of Ui Hyok's assistants. He had lost interest and told his opponent to go home, wash up, and call it a day. But she wasn't having it. She stammered, asking where he thought he was going, and pleaded for him not to leave. Ein shouted, reminding him that he had said he wanted to bring her head to her father. She declared that she wasn't done yet and that if she survived this battle, she would make sure he regretted this. She demanded that he come back and fight her, her voice echoing with determination. Friedrich sighed, clearly annoyed. He muttered about the noise, asking why she couldn't just shut up. He told her to stop whining, warning that he had shown her mercy, but if she kept begging for death, he might just give it to her. Suddenly, Eugene appeared, calling out Ein's name with a mix of relief and urgency. Friedrich turned, his eyes widening in surprise at the unexpected voice. She let out a confused sound, her mind racing with possibilities. She whispered, disbelief coloring her voice as she recognized the familiar figure. Uncle Eugene? Eugene nodded, his expression serious as he processed the situation. He muttered to himself, recalling an old man named Fried, his mind already racing ahead. He asked about a location, urgency lacing his words. As soon as he got the answer, he confirmed he knew the place, his tone firm and decisive. He reassured her, promising everything would be fine. Ein would be safe, he vowed, his voice steady and sure. Turning to Detective Kim, Eugene apologized, explaining something urgent had come up. Kim, understanding the gravity, told him to go without hesitation. Eugene asked for a flyer, his mind already halfway out the door. Kim handed it over without a word, sensing the urgency. Kim handed over the flyer, and Eugene thanked her, his voice trailing off as he hurriedly made his way out. He paused just long enough to thank Kim for her time, apologizing for the abrupt departure and the gloomy mood he had brought with him. The word nosy hung in the air, Eugene's mind already far from the conversation. He shook his head, dismissing the idea that Kim had been nosy. Instead, he admitted that their talk had given him courage, promising to reach out once things were sorted. Kim nodded, telling Eugene to take care, watching as the man seemed to brighten slightly despite the urgency. But then, in a flash, Eugene was creating a window and jumping out of it, leaving Kim stunned at the sudden exit. Kim couldn't help but chuckle at the dramatic exit, shaking her head as she muttered to herself about Eugene's sudden cheer. But then he noticed something odd. Why did Eugene have such a strange expression after seemingly cheering up? Eugene's strange expression lingered in his mind as he arrived at the place mentioned on the phone. This had to be it, but something felt off. The sight before him was a total mess, like a bomb had gone off. The destruction was intense, and he couldn't help but wonder what had happened here. If spells powerful enough to decimate the area were used, then whoever did this must be incredibly strong. The thought sent a chill down his spine. Suddenly, a voice echoed through the destruction, declaring they weren't done yet. The tension in the air thickened. With a sense of determination, he responded, ready to face whatever was coming next. Okie dokie, he thought, steeling himself for the challenge ahead. The silence that followed was heavy, filled with anticipation. A voice suddenly challenged him, telling him to come back and fight. The words echoed, filled with a mix of anger and desperation. Confusion washed over her. How did he know she was there? The mystery deepened, and she couldn't help but feel a sense of unease. MC revealed that someone who worked for her had called and warned him about the danger she was in. He made a mental note to thank that person later, but for now, he had to focus on the situation at hand. Friedrich, expressing disgust at the interruption, shot a fireball. Despite the creepy situation, he couldn't help but feel a sense of annoyance. Who was this person and why were they so angry? He admitted he couldn't help himself, and the tension between them grew. Asking for a moment's pause, MC promised to deal with the current situation after finishing his conversation with Ein. Ein stood there, stunned, as if she had just been hit by a truck. Her mind raced, trying to process what was happening, but all that came out was a single, bewildered word: what? The confusion turned into frustration, and the words spilled out like a dam breaking. What in the world was happening? And more importantly, why was this happening to her? MC pointed out something, drawing attention to a critical detail. The spell she was casting could have burst at any second, putting her in grave danger. The warning fell on deaf ears as she snapped back, asking if it even mattered. She had already made her intentions clear. Stop meddling in her life. The frustration boiled over, and she shouted, asking if it wasn't clear that this was none of his business. This was her chance to die as a mage and as the daughter of Wihyok-jong, and she wouldn't let anyone get in their way. He challenged her, asking if she really thought he was getting in her way. And why shouldn't he get in her way, anyway? He continued, asking how any right-minded person could stand idly by and let a young person kill themselves. Man, I swear that they just make him look creepier and creepier the further the chapters go. The words had struck a chord, and it was clear that this confrontation was far from over. The weight of the situation was heavy, and neither of them knew what to say. Ein spoke up, her voice barely above a whisper. She asked what she was supposed to do, her voice filled with confusion and uncertainty. Her answer was filled with desperation, a mix of determination and fear. This was the only way she could get closer to their father, the only way to prove herself. The thought of giving up was terrifying, but the idea of living with a useless heart was even worse. How else was she supposed to become her father's most treasured disciple? MC seemed to sense her internal struggle. He asked how and then added that was exactly what he was there for. Her father had given him this heart, and the mana held within it had enabled them to cast powerful spells, letting them move mountains and soar through the sky. It was a gift, but it was also a burden. But why not cast this extraordinary gift aside for a while? He softened, calling her by name and asking her to promise not to give up on life again. If she allowed him the chance to take care of her, he would do whatever it took to make her an Archmage. Even her father couldn't help him with that. How could this person possibly do what her father couldn't? She voiced her doubts, but something made her swallow the words. Maybe it was the sincerity in MC's voice, or maybe it was just the desperate hope that this time, things could be different. She was glad she didn't let the words slip out, because this man, this person who was offering to help her, was the very person she so desperately wanted to become. The realization hit her like a wave. This was the person she had always admired, always wanted to be like. And now he was offering to help her become just that. The moment hung heavy with possibility. This was the person she had always looked up to, the one she wanted to emulate. And now he was offering a chance to make that dream a reality. But with opportunity came uncertainty. The offer felt surreal, almost like some kind of pressure tactic. Was this really happening? Or was it all just a trick of the mind? Unbelievable. Taking a deep breath, she decided to take the leap. If this was the path to becoming like her idol, she would take the risk. But what did this mean for their relationship? Was he now to be called master? The term master felt a bit outdated, a bit too formal. It didn't quite fit the dynamic he was aiming for. How about something more modern? Something that reflected the guidance and mentorship he was seeking? Teach, perhaps? That had a nice ring to it. But the response was not what she expected. Silence hung in the air, followed by a gasp of surprise. Chaos erupted. Accusations flew, and confusion reigned. What had just happened? Why wasn't there any pain? Everyone was trying to process what had just occurred. What did this mean for the future? What is this brand new heart? A sudden realization hit. She was getting this heart. The revelation left a void, an absence where chaos once thrived. The overwhelming surge of mana that once pulsed through her veins had vanished, leaving behind an eerie calm. The heart that once felt foreign now beat in harmony, as if finally finding its rhythm. A strange tranquility washed over her. For the first time, her heart felt at ease, no longer a separate entity but a part of her being. The discomfort that had plagued her for so long was gone, replaced by a sense of wholeness. With this newfound peace came a resolve. Death was no longer an inevitability. She would survive, and somehow, she would reclaim her magic. The determination burned within her, a stark contrast to the emptiness she had felt before. MC cut through the silence, a reminder of a presence he had forgotten. He declared his conversation with Ein was over. If there was anything else to discuss, he was ready to listen. But cool Friedrich over here on his phone. This was absolutely ridiculous. He couldn't remember the last time he had been disrespected like this. The calm demeanor cracked, revealing a simmering anger beneath. He had nothing to say, not really, but there was one thing that had been bugging him, a nagging thought he couldn't shake off. The words hung in the air, a prelude to a confrontation. He recalled something said earlier, a phrase that sounded familiar. Got that temper? It echoed in his mind, a memory struggling to surface. It felt like they had met before, and that bugged him more than anything. He couldn't recall ever seeing someone as hideous as the protagonist before him. It had been a long time, hadn't it? The last time he saw him was about 30 years ago, a memory buried deep but now clawing its way back. The memory came rushing back, a scene from 3 decades ago. He had come to his master in a rage, received the beating of a lifetime, and ran away with his tail between his legs. The past and present collided, a confrontation long overdue. As the memories flooded back, so did the words that had been etched into his mind. Beating of a lifetime, ran away with his tail between his legs. Those words echoed, a bitter reminder of a past he couldn't escape. Fried voice cut through the silence, a calm yet sharp retort. That's a very interesting choice of words. It seemed like everyone raised by Wihiok had a knack for stirring the pot, for running their mouths without a filter. It was as if every single one of them had a habit of running their filthy mouths, pushing buttons they knew shouldn't be pushed. Friedrich's patience snapped, his voice a low growl. It made him want to tear them to pieces, to make them pay for their insolence. The tension was palpable, a storm ready to break. Ein couldn't help but intervene, her voice laced with concern. What's the matter with him? Why would he provoke Friedrich for no reason? She knew the stakes, knew that Friedrich was the most powerful mage alive, a force to be reckoned with. Only archmages could defeat him, and even that was a long shot. Her frustration boiled over. He had made such a fuss about keeping her alive, but now he was going to get them killed. It was all for the best, Eugene said, but Ein couldn't see how this could possibly end well. Eugene's voice was steady, his resolve unshaken. Friedrich was too dangerous to be left to his own devices. There was a plan, a purpose to this madness. Besides, this would be great for the demonstration, Eugene said. It would stick in her memory, a lesson she wouldn't soon forget. Watch closely, Ein, he urged. This was for Ein Zhong, the very first student of Eugene's magic. This was Mr. Eugene's Archmage curriculum, and today was orientation day. The stage was set, the players in place. What would unfold next was anyone's guess. The stage was set, the players in place, and the first act of this grand performance began with a single bewildered utterance from Ein. Her eyes widened as she took in the sight before her. A single word escaping her lips, a word that seemed to hang in the air, heavy with confusion and disbelief. Her confusion only deepened as she tried to make sense of the bizarre circle before her. It was unlike anything she had ever seen, its intricate patterns and symbols foreign and alien. She could feel her heart pounding in her chest as she struggled to comprehend what she was seeing. Ein's voice trembled as she turned to Eugene, her eyes searching his for some semblance of an explanation. She had always prided herself on her knowledge of magic, but this was something else entirely. It was as if the very foundations of her understanding were being challenged. Eugene's response was calm, almost casual, as if he were discussing the weather rather than the strange, otherworldly circle that had Ein so flustered. He simply stated that it was magic, that he was casting a spell, his voice steady and sure. His words hung in the air, a warning and a promise all at once. Ein could feel the weight of his gaze on her, the intensity of his focus. She knew that she was far from safe, that danger lurked in the shadows, ready to strike at any moment. He asked Ein if she could guess how much mana he had spent to cast the spell, his eyes glinting with a challenge. Ein's mind raced as she tried to calculate the cost of such a complex spell. She had always been quick with numbers, with the intricate calculations that magic demanded. But this was something else entirely. She opened her mouth to respond, to show off her knowledge and understanding. But Eugene beat her to it, his voice ringing out clear and true. He told her that the answer was 0, that he hadn't used any mana at all. Ein's eyes widened in shock, her mind struggling to comprehend what she had just heard. It was impossible, it defied every law of magic she had ever learned. But Eugene simply smiled, his eyes kind as he explained that there was no need to worry about not having mana in her heart. He continued, his voice steady and sure, telling her that he, her teacher, didn't have mana in his heart either. and that was what he was about to show her. From now on, he would teach her how to use magic without using mana. Ein's mind was a whirlwind of thoughts and questions. Why was he saying all these puzzling things during a life-threatening situation? Had he really defeated Friedrich? She couldn't make sense of it all. Her gaze flicked to Eugene, taking in his stance, his posture. He was a close-range fighter, she realized. He looked almost defenseless, standing there without a weapon in sight. But Fried knew better than to underestimate him. After all, if he was a disciple of Wihiok, he must have a skill or two of his own. Curiosity piqued, he decided to test his capabilities. It was time to see what he was made of. With a swift motion, he summoned binding vines, aiming to entangle him and gauge his reaction. The vines shot forward, but Fried remained calm, his eyes tracking the movement with a focus that betrayed his relaxed demeanor. He watched intently, ready to see how he would handle the situation. Eugene's response was swift and precise. With a simple spell, he countered his attack, leaving him stunned. She couldn't believe it. She had bombarded the barrier with all her powerful spells, yet he had broken it with a basic spell. How was that possible? It was clear that his skills were not to be underestimated. He couldn't help but compare him to Wihiok's daughter. He was clearly better, but he wasn't about to admit that out loud. You're not bad, he thought, but that's about it. Eugene, however, wasn't about to let him off that easily. He challenged him, stating that he wasn't good enough to be running his mouth. The tension between them grew, each sizing the other up, ready for the next move. He recalled his regenerative abilities, a fact that added a layer of complexity to their confrontation. His head could regenerate even if it got blown off. He admitted that his abilities were quite shocking. Regeneration spells that could repair severe injuries like that were rare. Was this what he had been betting on all along? As she processed the shock of his regeneration abilities, she couldn't help but acknowledge how tricky this spell was to deal with. But he was up against Friedrich, the most powerful mage alive, and if anyone could unravel it, it would be him. Friedrich had faced opponents like this before. There was no such thing as an immortal, everyone had a weakness. There was always a core that served as the center of the regeneration, or a breaking point. Friedrich was determined to find it. He planned to break him down to a molecular level from within, and reconstruct him into a mess to break the spell's logic. Fried was left stunned, struggling to comprehend how MC was holding on. The Dark Lightning was a deconstruction spell that melted everything in its path. Anything that came in contact with it, be it an object or mana, got deconstructed to a molecular level. But MC was grabbing it as if he was pulling a weed out of the ground by its roots. It was an insane sight to behold. He couldn't believe what he was seeing. What kind of bizarre magic was this? But MC wasn't concerned with his opponent's confusion. Fried declared that he was going to melt him down and scatter him around. He would figure out the rest after that. With a triumphant cry, Friedrich lunged forward, ready to execute his plan. But MC smirked, revealing that he had 12 layers of high-density defensive spells wrapped around his entire body. Friedrich's eyes widened in surprise. This was going to be more challenging than he thought. Friedrich's surprise quickly faded as MC echoed, warning him not to get too excited just because he managed to shatter his barrier. Sure, he might have gotten a hold of his arm, but destroying a nuclear bunker with his bare hands sounded way easier at this point. Friedrich couldn't help but wonder what he had gotten himself into this time. As the dust settled, Friedrich's eyes widened even more. What the hell was this? The situation was getting weirder by the second, and he wasn't sure if he was ready for what came next. Before he could process it all, another exclamation rang out. For sake. This was turning into a real mess, and Friedrich was starting to feel the pressure. MC questioned what Friedrich had done, and he could almost hear the disbelief dripping from every word. This wasn't exactly how he planned things to go, but here they were. He continued, pointing out that cutting off his own arm must have hurt. He could have just left it as it was. But no, things had to get dramatic. Friedrich couldn't believe what he was hearing. There was a brief pause, the kind that made Friedrich's skin crawl. What was coming next? He braced himself, ready for whatever twist this strange encounter was about to throw his way. Ein flinched, unsure of what was happening. Her hesitant voice responded, and she could sense the tension rising. MC apologized, explaining that he wanted to show more examples of using magic without using mana. But given the situation, it seemed like a tough ask. He decided to give a quick rundown of what he had shown so far, and Ein listened intently, curious about what she might learn. He reminded Ein of a spell from earlier, a skill that allowed one to freely transform the shape and components of their body. It was a fascinating concept, and Ein couldn't help but be intrigued. He continued, explaining that the skill even allowed one to reshape anything they touched. Ein's mind raced with the possibilities, imagining the potential of such an ability. But then he dropped a bombshell. Technically speaking, it wasn't really magic. Friedrich's eyebrows shot up. What did he mean by that? He clarified that this was what Ayn would be learning. Her mind buzzed with questions and excitement. What an unexpected turn of events. Ayn's mind raced with curiosity, but before she could process her thoughts, MC dropped a bombshell. Since magic circles weren't needed for this spell, it was called non-circle magic. Okay, that name was a bit on the nose, but it was certainly intriguing. Friedrich's expression shifted as he pondered this revelation. Non-circle magic. That was something he had never heard of before. A chill ran down his spine. This was disturbing. What kind of magic was this, and why did it feel so wrong? Friedrich's mind whirled with questions. This feeling, what was it? It gnawed at him, unsettling and foreign. He tried to pinpoint the source of his discomfort. What was this sensation? It was as if something was eating away at his ability to think clearly. Was it the pain from losing his arm? No, it couldn't be. This was something else entirely. Friedrich's confusion deepened. Was he confused by the bizarre magic he was witnessing? Or was there something more sinister at play? He shook his head, trying to clear his thoughts. No, that wasn't it. This feeling was different, more visceral. Friedrich's mind raced, trying to make sense of the turmoil within him. This was unlike anything he had ever experienced. He took a deep breath, trying to steady himself, but the feeling persisted, growing stronger with each passing moment. Friedrich's thoughts were a whirlwind. He needed to understand what was happening to him. As he grappled with his emotions, a realization dawned on him. This feeling, it had started the moment he laid eyes on the mysterious figure. A strange feeling of disgust rose within him, growing stronger with each passing moment. What was this, and why was it happening? The strange disgust churning inside him sharpened into something clearer. Was this contempt he was feeling, a deep revulsion at something he couldn't yet name? A sinking realization hit him like a gut punch. This was way bigger than he'd signed up for, some next-level mess he never should have touched with a 10-foot pole. His mind reeled as the pieces clicked together in all the wrong ways. What he was seeing shouldn't even exist in this world, and the more he understood, the more he just wanted to scream stop and wake up from this nightmare. Silence hung heavy as the weight of the revelation pressed down on him, stealing his breath and leaving him frozen in place. The pieces were falling into place, each one more impossible than the last, and he could feel the world tilting beneath his feet. Uncle Eugene? No way, this couldn't be happening, not in a million years. His mind screamed in denial, rejecting the truth that was staring him right in the face. This wasn't just some random creature. This was something far more sinister. The air itself seemed to still as the name echoed in his mind. A name that shouldn't be possible. A name that changed everything. Friedrich Gamara. The name sent a chill down his spine, and he could feel the world shifting around him. Nothing would ever be the same again. Heavy and suffocating, as if the very mention of it had changed the fabric of reality itself. This creature, this impossible being, it was laughing, the sound echoing through his mind like a nightmare he couldn't wake up from. The laughter was too loud, too bright, like nails on a chalkboard, grating against his very soul. It couldn't help itself, the creature said, as if that was supposed to make it better. But the way it talked about magic, like it was some kind of drug, sent a shiver down his spine. And then, as suddenly as it had begun, it was over. The laughter faded, the creature stilled, and he was left standing there, wondering if it had all been some terrible dream. Uncle Eugene had sounded so sure of himself, but now, in the aftermath, doubt crept in. Had he really pulled through, or was this just a fleeting moment before the inevitable end? Did Uncle Eugene really defeat Friedrich? The silence was deafening, and the uncertainty gnawed at him. In the quiet, Friedrich echoed, almost in disbelief. He never thought he would live to see his own heart. The words were simple, but they carried the weight of 1,000 battles. And then, a soft, almost hesitant hey broke through the tension. A smirk played on his lips as he admitted he let his guard down. The response was swift, a mix of surprise and sarcasm. Oh, is that what happened? The tension eased slightly, but the stakes were still high. Battle magic wasn't his field of expertise after all. He had to take his word for it, but the sarcasm didn't stop. A laugh escaped, the kind that held more pain than humor. He just wouldn't stop running his mouth, would he? A true disciple of Wihiok, through and through. Memories flooded back, vivid and brutal. He remembered how Friedrich destroyed the city with a flick of his finger, the screams of citizens echoing through the streets, the fire consuming everything in its path. The resolve hardened in his voice. Friedrich must not be allowed to use magic. He would put an end to Friedrich the mage right here, right now. A smirk played on his lips, a mix of defiance and acceptance. Yeah, sure. Be as smug as you like. He had earned it, after all. The admission was bitter but true. He had won this round. He could take it, consider it his trophy. The words were laced with irony, but the truth was undeniable. The realization hit him like a ton of bricks. Right before he cut off his heart, he did the unthinkable. He redirected the mana in his heart straight into the veins. The move was desperate, brilliant, and terrifying all at once. And then, a name echoed through the chaos. Shaori. The call was urgent, filled with a mix of fear and hope. As the name Shaori echoed through the chaos, a realization struck hard. That man was far too dangerous, and the urgency in the voice confirmed it. The stakes had just gotten real. Something big was about to go down. The atmosphere crackled with unseen energy, a prelude to the storm that was about to unleash. Suddenly, the air shimmered with a strange distortion. Spatial magic was at play, bending reality itself to someone's will. This was no ordinary fight. The plan was to see Archmage Zhang, but the figure before them was anything but expected. This monster was a far cry from what they had anticipated. The damage was evident, an arm and a heart lost, leaving behind a mess of a situation. An offer was extended to retreat to safety, but the response was a firm refusal. A moment was needed to gather thoughts and strength. The battle had taken its toll, but it wasn't over yet. That guy had made them realize something crucial. There was a burning desire to test something out, to return the favor and show what they were truly capable of. The incantation began, words of power flowing like a river of fire.
Staub, geschmiedet Atem des im Lava Salamanders.
The very air vibrated with the weight of the spell. A third circle spell was being cast, a display of magical prowess that left everyone in awe. The battlefield was about to be turned upside down. The spell reached its crescendo, a burst of energy that shook the very foundations of the arena. Gratitude wasn't something that came easily, but this was an exception. Thanks were in order, a rare acknowledgement of something greater than expected. MC had given them something invaluable. The promise of a rematch hung in the air, a vow to create a bigger and better stage for their next encounter. This fight was far from over, and the anticipation for the next round was already building. As the dust settled from their intense clash, an unexpected laughter echoed through the arena. The crowd was left in stunned silence, wondering what could possibly be happening now. Had the battle truly ended so abruptly? And where was the powerful mage who had dominated the fight just moments ago? The mighty Friedrich had indeed retreated, leaving his opponent victorious in the most unexpected of ways. The underdog had emerged triumphant, defeating the most powerful mage in the realm without the aid of an archmage. It was a feat that seemed impossible, yet it had happened right before her eyes. Amidst the celebration, the victor humbly admitted that luck had played a part in his victory. His opponent had let his guard down, and he was grateful that the battle had ended before his time ran out. Ayn couldn't contain her excitement, her voice ringing out above the cheers. She dismissed the idea that Friedrich had simply let his guard down, insisting that her uncle Eugene had truly beaten the cranky old man. She praised Eugene's incredible display of non-circle magic, her pride evident in every word. Eugene, however, seemed more concerned with Ayn's well-being, his voice cutting through her excitement. He vowed to teach Ayn everything he knew, promising to make her the second greatest archmage of all time. His words were filled with determination and a hint of the old Eugene, the one who never backed down from a challenge. But his tone softened as he warned Ayn never to do something as reckless as what she did today. He made her promise to treasure her life until she became an archmage, his concern for her safety evident in every word. Ayn rolled her eyes, a hint of a smile playing on her lips. She couldn't believe that after all this time, Eugene was still the same worrywart he had always been. But she knew that his concern came from a place of love, and she wouldn't have it any other way. He hadn't changed a bit, and that was just fine with her. With a grin, Ayn promised Eugene that she would be careful, her voice filled with determination. She was ready to learn, to grow, and to become the greatest archmage the world had ever seen. Ayn's determination hung in the air, but the moment was cut short. A sudden alert echoed through the room. Friedrich had been sighted. The atmosphere shifted, tension replacing the earlier warmth. Details poured in. A battle between mages had left a mountainous area on the eastern outskirts of Seoul in ruins. Thankfully, no civilians were caught in the crossfire, but the destruction was undeniable. Friedrich had been fighting, and the pieces started to fall into place. Ayn must have gone after him, her determination to prove herself overriding any caution. The realization hit hard, she was gone. There was no telling if he could have stopped her, but as her father, he would have tried. Her actions, driven by a need to prove herself, weighed heavily on his mind. An interruption came, hesitant but urgent. During the battle, something unexpected had happened. Eugene had intervened, turning the tide. Friedrich had fled, and Ein was safe. The news hung in the air, a mix of relief and disbelief. Could it be? Was Eugene really back? As the weight of Eugene's return settled in, a hesitant voice cut through the tension, calling out for the doctor, unsure of what to make of the situation. The doctor responded, curiosity lacing their tone, only to be met with a heavy confession. They had come to assist with an urgent surgery, but doubts gnawed at them. Was this really the right call? The revelation hit hard. The man lying before them was none other than Friedrich, a name that sent shivers down their spines. The internal struggle was real. Saving lives was their oath. But how could they save a man known for causing so much destruction? A sharp retort sliced through the air, a reminder of their predicament. They had been kidnapped, dragged to this hideout. The priority now? Focus on the operation and make it out alive. Inquiries about the patient's condition were met with a glimmer of hope. He was still holding on, fighting for his life. With a sense of urgency, the decision was made to proceed immediately. A polite greeting was exchanged, a small semblance of normalcy in the chaos. Gratitude flowed from the patient, weak but sincere, thanking them for everything they had done. A name was spoken, Linus, followed by a humble dismissal of the thanks, a quiet moment of respect between them. The honor of serving was acknowledged, and a wish was made for the fulfillment of the patient's goals, a rare moment of sincerity in the midst of turmoil. The operation was ready to commence, with the patient's son's heart and right arm prepped for transplant. The team sprang into action, determined to see it through. A name was called out, Shaori, and a respectful response followed, the tension in the room palpable. Instructions were given for a proper funeral, a somber reminder of the gravity of their situation. The operation was done, but the warning was clear: any more strain could be fatal. A command was issued, summoning the Zodiac, all of them, a sense of foreboding hanging in the air. Reflections on new experiences and the peculiar sensation of having old blood drained out led to a revelation. A better plan had come to mind. A thought-provoking statement was made, a reminder that one should never underestimate others. Even those looked down upon could rise to greatness, perhaps even surpassing those considered superior. The reminder of never underestimating others lingered, and as if to prove that point further, his echoed, acknowledging that times had indeed changed, along with the mages. But those changes weren't quite what had been expected, adding a twist to the tale. Shifting gears to a lighter note, someone took a sip of iced coffee, the cold brew offering a new experience. The taste was a mix of bitterness and nuttiness, a far cry from what they were used to. Coffee had always been off-limits due to a heart condition. But now, it was just another drink. Nothing life-changing, just a simple pleasure. Coffee wasn't meant to be life-changing anyway. But the question hung in the air: how were they feeling? The response was enthusiastic. She felt great. In fact, she had never been better. Relief washed over her as she saw her companions were okay too. It had been touch and go for a moment, a close call that had her thinking the worst. Thankfully, a skilled healer had been there to save the day. The healer had burst into the emergency room, offering help. It had been a shock, nearly scaring them to death. But in the end, he had saved them. Unpredictable as ever, but effective. A pause hung in the air as the boss was addressed, the question lingering: were they really doing this? The decision to close down felt sudden, too sudden. Ein had made it clear. She was no longer a mage, no longer taking the same jobs. But this was confidential. She had told the rest of the staff they were going abroad to recover from the fight with Friedrich. The question hung in the air: was it true? The answer was simple: yes. As promised, Mr. Eugene would help her get her magic back. The timeline was uncertain, but she was to stay out of sight and train under him for the time being. Sure, Mr. Eugene was an incredible mage who had beaten Friedrich. But the question remained: was she serious about learning that weird branch of magic? But hey, no pressure, right? Whether she was serious about that weird branch of magic or not, it wasn't the end of the world. She used to be the super uptight boss, all about the results and nothing else. But now that she was no longer a mage, she finally looked at ease, like a weight had been lifted off her shoulders. She had him to thank for that. He genuinely seemed to have her best interests at heart, which was a rare find in their world. He had only called that guy because there was no way to reach Archmage Zhang. And then, out of nowhere, someone appeared. The news hit like a ton of bricks. She was retiring? No way, she couldn't accept that. Ein was an incredible mage. The world still needed her. They weren't ready to let her go. But she wasn't retiring, not really. She just needed time to recover, like rehabilitation. That was why she was going abroad. She wanted to go with her to help in any way she could. But the girl had enough of her troublemaking. She was an accountant, how was she going to help her rehabilitate? Besides, a disciple of Archmage Zhang himself would be helping her recover. He had fixed her hat. It was done already. She couldn't believe it. He had managed to restore the transformation function and the brim because it was made with a spell too advanced for his level. It was impressive, to say the least. She blamed herself for what had happened. None of this would have happened if she had been stronger. But she thanked him for fixing her hat. She thanked Songhua, Yuna, and Taejin for everything. Their hard work had allowed her to focus on her job without worrying about the rest. She told Yunhai not to worry about it. She would have gone to fight Friedrich even if Yunhai hadn't asked her to. She thanked her for always looking out for her. And Huimyong. She would never forget what he did for her. She wouldn't be there if it weren't for him. She thanked them all for being there for someone like her. They were all very talented, and she knew they would find better roles in better places soon. She would work on her rehabilitation and come back as a mage they could all be proud of. With her mind set on rehabilitation and a brighter future, she couldn't help but feel a spark of excitement. The road ahead was uncertain, but she was ready to embrace whatever came her way. She had no idea what to expect, but something inside her whispered that everything would turn out just fine. The best part? She no longer had to worry about dying a meaningful death. Mr. Eugene had proven his capabilities and his commitment to her growth. He had promised to make her an even better mage than he was. Her father's most talented disciple had promised her a future, and she was going to trust him. With renewed determination, she was ready to learn and grow under his guidance. Her journey as a student began, with Mr. Eugene as her teacher. As she arrived early for her lesson, she was greeted by Mr. Eugene, who noted her punctuality with a hint of surprise. He reminded her of their agreement to keep their arrangement a secret, his tone carrying a hint of caution. Before she could respond, a new voice entered the conversation. Kim introduced herself, mentioning that Mr. Eugene had told her so much about her. She questioned Mr. Eugene about sharing so much information, reminding him of their secret agreement. He quickly assured her that Kim was trustworthy. Mr. Eugene introduced Detective Kim, a friend who could be trusted. She was amazing and he vouched for her character. Feeling a bit overwhelmed, she decided it was best to leave. She had only dropped by and needed to get back to work. Kim reassured her that she wouldn't tell anyone about her heart problem and MC invited her to stay. She thanked him but declined. As she turned to leave, Mr. Eugene offered to see her off, but she insisted she would be fine. She was sure the two of them had work to do. As she stepped away, Mr. Eugene tried to insist on walking her out, but she waved him off, saying she'd be fine on her own. She figured they both had better things to do anyway. Just then, Ayn cut in, teasing Mr. Eugene about his loud mouth. She reminded him he was supposed to be abroad, and they both knew why. The tension spiked as the conversation took a sharp turn. She continued, painting a grim picture of what would happen if people found out about Ayn Zhang, the once great mage who had locked away countless criminals. The daughter of the Archmage, now powerless and living on the outskirts, would be a prime target for every villain out there. But despite the danger, MC tried to reassure, saying there was nothing to worry about. The conversation shifted, revealing a surprising twist. The famous mage was actually his niece, and she didn't seem intimidated by his looks. Maybe it was because she grew up around him. Kim seemed glad that she had someone close, but the mood shifted abruptly when Mr. Eugene reacted with confusion. Mr. Eugene was caught off guard when someone mentioned he had a visitor. He sighed, clearly not in the mood for surprises. The voice teased him about having quite a few visitors that day, joking that he might as well throw a party and invite everyone. Mr. Eugene didn't find it funny. Frustrated, Ayn decided to step outside, telling him to call her once he was done. Ayn asked what was going on, clearly confused by the sudden tension. She chimed in, asking why he was making that face, as if something was seriously wrong. A smooth voice commented on how pretty she was, even with a cap covering her head. She reacted with shock, clearly not expecting such a bold remark. She snapped at him to get his hands off, furious that he would dare touch her without permission. Her anger was palpable. The man didn't seem fazed, instead complimenting her again and wondering aloud who her father was, as if her beauty was some kind of mystery. He then softened his tone, saying it was nice to see her after so long and asking how she was feeling. She stammered, saying she was fine, but the tension was still there. And then, she dropped the bombshell father. The word, father, hung in the air like a suspended spell. She quickly apologized for her outburst, clearly not expecting him to show up at a place like this. But he wasn't having it. Why wouldn't he be there? It was exactly where he needed to be, not just as a father but as a mentor. This was where his daughter was starting her new journey, after all. And it wasn't just about her. This place was also the school of his most prized disciple, the one he was most proud of. He turned to the young man, a knowing smile playing on his lips. Eugene, right? He then shifted his gaze back to his daughter, noting how much she'd grown. The Archmage Wihyok wasn't just there as a father, but as a mentor, a guide, and a powerful figure in their world. As he admired his daughter's growth, Wihyok suddenly boomed, asking if he had met Friedrich. The protagonist's thoughts were interrupted, and he found himself drawn into a conversation. He continued, wondering if Friedrich was still causing trouble and why he couldn't act his age. It reminisced about how Friedrich wasn't like that when he was younger, suggesting he might be going through a late rebellious phase. The Archmage simply thanked Eugene, his response brief but polite. He then mentioned hearing that he had saved Ain, expressing concern about her reckless nature despite her intelligence and kindness. He was glad to have him as a disciple, someone who could look out for her. MC stood there, the weight of the conversation settling in. He thought to himself that now was not the time, not when Ain was watching. He needed to get himself together and stay calm, reassuring himself that he could do this. He acknowledged that there was always a possibility of this happening. In fact, it was bound to happen. His thoughts trailed off as he processed the situation. MC stood in silence, the weight of his thoughts pressing down on him, as if time itself was holding its breath. His mind raced, but his expression remained calm and composed. The silence stretched on, a quiet before the storm of decisions he knew he had to make. Finally, he let out a soft sigh, the sound barely audible but heavy with unspoken words. The weight of his sigh still hung in the air when Wihyok echoed, laced with regret. What a shame, it mused, wishing their meeting could have been under better circumstances. A pause lingered, heavy with the intensity of MC. MC softened, barely above a whisper. I'm sorry, he confessed, the words hanging in the air like a heavy fog. He continued, admitting he knew he didn't deserve this moment, acknowledging how immature it might seem, but he couldn't hold back any longer. He confessed missing Wihyok deeply but couldn't find the courage to visit, fearing rejection. He asked for a moment, the request tinged with desperation. Wihyok noted how much Eugene had grown, taller and yet, in some ways, still the same. But despite the growth, he observed, Eugene was still a kid inside, a playful remark that carried a hint of fondness. Kim hesitated, then announced it was time to leave, the tone shifting as if bracing for something more. Detective Kim, Wihyok called out, his voice trembling slightly as he asked if the detective knew who he was. The detective responded, confirming she did, Wihyok acknowledging her reputation as a great detective who worked tirelessly for the people's safety. And, he added, someone who looked out for Eugene, his dear disciple. As his master, he expressed gratitude, the words heavy with sincerity. The detective stammered a response, welcoming the thanks before hastily saying goodbye. She muttered to herself about nearly losing her composure, marveling at the unbelievable face before her, so different from Eugene's yet equally striking. Still reeling from the encounter, Ain's thoughts were interrupted by a sudden question about her lost mana. With a sigh, she admitted the truth to her father, the weight of her confession lingering in the air. Her father connected the dots, realizing that was why she had sought Eugene's help. There was a hint of disappointment in his voice as he pointed out that his daughter could have come to him first. Stammering, Ain tried to explain that it wasn't about trust, but her father cut her off. Her father assured her that Eugene could be trusted. After all, he was his most trusted disciple. Maybe he could help more than he could. She felt a pang of guilt but also a sense of relief. Changing the subject, her father announced that he was going to have a little chat with Eugene. He couldn't very well have her enroll in a school without a parent-teacher conference first, right? Ain couldn't help but smile at the absurdity of the situation. With a final instruction to wait there, her father left, promising they wouldn't take long. Ain was left alone with her thoughts, the silence almost deafening. Meanwhile, Wihyok found Eugene and expressed his surprise. Wihyok reminisced about the past, recalling how he had ripped out Eugene's heart and cut his body into pieces. Eugene listened silently, his expression unreadable. He continued, mentioning how he had thrown the pieces into the chasm between different dimensions. The weight of his words hung heavily in the air. Who would have thought Eugene would come back alive? Wihyok's voice was filled with a mix of surprise and something else, something he couldn't quite put his finger on. Eugene always had a way of exceeding his expectations. Wihyok wondered aloud what kind of miracle he had pulled off. Eugene remained silent, his thoughts a whirlwind of memories and emotions. Eugene began to explain how it all happened when he ended up in the chasm between dimensions. The properties in that dimension stopped the decomposition of his body, so he was drifting about in a near-death state. But Wihyok interrupted him, saying that wasn't what he wanted to ask. With a serious expression, Wihyok asked Eugene if he hated him. The question hung in the air, heavy with unspoken emotions and past grievances. Eugene hesitated, his thoughts racing as he considered his response. Eugene's thoughts swirled as he stared at Wihyok, the weight of the question still lingering. "Master," he began, his voice steady despite the turmoil inside. "Since the day you saved me from the brink of death. Every single day I've spent with you, my goal in life has been to live for you and you alone. So how could I ever hate you? If you need me to, I'd gladly die once again right here and now." A heavy silence fell between them, the air thick with unspoken emotions. Indeed, the more he thinks about it, the clearer it becomes. "You're the only one he can really count on." "Very well, Eugene. If you're still willing to do anything for me, remember the plan? What would you say if I proposed it again?" "Master," Eugene's voice was barely a whisper, the weight of the past pressing down on him. "I said this 14 years ago as well, but the plan is a bit... No, not a bit. It's extremely frightening. He'd do anything to help his master. Okay, that's enough." He turned him down twice. He don't need him coming up with excuses and making him feel all the more miserable. Wihyok gave up on the plan that day anyway. He guess he'll have to go with plan B. By the way, his skills are quite impressive. How was he able to do this without mana? Is this how he survived what should have clearly been a fatal experience? Oh, this? MC named it non-circle magic. He created a system to teach it, so people who don't have mana can also learn to use magic as long as they study hard and practice diligently. With the introduction of non-circle magic out of the way, the focus shifted to Ayn, the first student to be taught this new form of magic. The goal was clear, to help her become an Archmage, a master of magic. This would create a ripple effect, inspiring students who admire her and want to be like her. The plan was to train many good and skilled mages who would work hard to make the world a better place. By doing so, the world would be filled with good magic, protecting people's lives and futures. This was the dream, a world where magic was used for the betterment of all. And once this dream was achieved, there would be no need to carry out the master's plan. The vision was clear, and the path was set. But the master was not impressed, finding the plan vague, wishy-washy, and optimistic. It was clear that the master did not like the plan. With a sigh, the master addressed Eugene, acknowledging the situation and moving forward. The master entrusted Ayn to Eugene's care, asking him to teach her well and see if he could make an Archmage out of her. Even if Eugene did not help with the master's plan, the master would be rooting for him, as long as he did not get in the way. He expressed disappointment, saying that Eugene made him hope, break his heart, and disappoint him again. Eugene was probably the only one in the world who made the master go through heaven and hell. MC had one request to make of Eugene. Ayn would become a great Archmage, second only to the master. MC asked that Wihyok take all the hope he once had for him and place it in Ayn instead. With the weight of her father's words still echoing in her mind, Ayn found herself lost in thought, reflecting on the journey ahead for her and the promise she had just made. A sudden voice broke the silence, calling out to her, jolting Ayn back to the present. The father apologized for keeping her waiting, explaining that he hadn't seen Eugene for a long time and they had much to catch up on. She reassured him that it was okay and it didn't take that long anyway. The conversation shifted as the father noted that it had been around 14 years since she became able to use magic, to which they agreed. The father admitted that it wasn't easy for him to watch her risk her life just to impress him and meet his expectations. He revealed that all this time, he had been waiting for her to find a dream of her own as a mage. She stammered, saying that wasn't what she was trying to do, leaving her sentence hanging in the air. He continued, trying to express what he truly wanted, but the words seemed stuck. The father expressed his pride in having her as his disciple but emphasized that what was more important was the fact that she was his eldest daughter, whom he loved more than anyone in the world. He assured her that no matter what she did, what she dreamed of, and what she managed to achieve, that would never change. He wanted her to remember that and find a goal worth putting all her effort into. She responded, calling him daddy before correcting herself to father. She promised to try her best, her voice filled with determination and a newfound sense of purpose. With the emotional moment passing, the father seemed to shift gears, preparing to move on to the next topic. He told Eugene as the principal of Eugene's magic school and asked him to take good care of his little Ayn. Eugene assured him that he could count on him. Ayn was overwhelmed with emotion, realizing that her father hadn't given up on her and loved her more than anyone in the world. With the emotional weight of the moment still lingering, the father suddenly shifted the conversation to a more practical matter, asking about the tuition fee, leaving her slightly taken aback. Still reeling from the emotional whiplash, The conversation took another sharp turn. The protagonist began explaining the curriculum, but before he could even finish his sentence, Ayn interrupted with a burst of disbelief. She couldn't wrap her head around the idea of paying for this. It felt like a betrayal of the help she thought she was being offered. The protagonist was taken aback by her reaction. Of course, there was a tuition fee, it was a school after all. But she was hurt. She had genuinely believed that he was offering to teach her out of the goodness of his heart. He tried to explain that he had created a personalized curriculum for her, and that it wouldn't be fair to other incoming students if he didn't charge her for the lessons. She was left speechless, her mind racing with the implications of this unexpected turn of events. As Wihyok looked over the tuition fees, he noticed that they were much cheaper than other academies. Before she could protest, the father insisted on paying for it himself. The daughter was stunned, her mind struggling to keep up with the rapid-fire developments. She quickly regained her composure and insisted that she could pay her own tuition. She was 22, an adult, and had money from her company. Wihyok seemed taken aback by her sudden maturity and independence. He couldn't help but acknowledge how much she had grown up. The daughter had become quite the responsible adult, much to the admiration of those around her. The conversation then shifted to her company. One of her employees informed her that they had sold all the magic gear, including her suit, as instructed. They had also paid all the cancellation fees for the jobs they couldn't complete and made 5 years of regular donations to the welfare organization she had been supporting. The employee hesitated before asking if she thought she was giving them too much severance pay. The company's funds weren't enough to cover it, and they didn't want her to dip into her own pocket, leaving her with little left. She explained that the cancellation fees, donations, and severance pay were necessary to ensure that the closure of the company wouldn't affect their careers. It was the least she could do for their hard work and dedication. The employee was touched by her generosity and concern for their well-being. She also mentioned that it was best to settle all financial matters so they wouldn't affect her or her father's reputation. She had even sold her house and moved into a rental apartment to make ends meet. Despite the financial strain, she found some comfort in knowing that Mr. Eugene wouldn't charge her anything. With the encouragement of those around her, she felt a renewed sense of determination. She could do this, and she had the support of her loved ones every step of the way. With her renewed sense of determination, she turned her attention to the next challenge. Okay, so what was the plan now? The Zodiac? Yeah, they had a lead on that. He would go and see what they were up to. But first, he had to handle something urgent. He sent a quick message, apologizing for not being able to join for lunch. Maybe next time. MC understood, suggesting they book a nice restaurant for next time. No worries, they would catch up soon. Have a good day at work. With a warm goodbye, he reminded them to be nice to each other and stay safe. And just like that, he was off. They watched as Wihyok teleported away, leaving them with a mix of amusement and confusion. Why bring a car if you're just going to teleport? Shrugging it off, MC decided to focus on the lunch plans with his remaining companion. He could be really quirky at times, but that was part of his charm. They agreed to go for lunch together, keeping it simple and cheap. Unexpected expenses this month meant no fancy meals, but that was okay. MC suggested they go out for lunch and talk about the curriculum, the one that would turn her into an Archmage. Now that was a plan she could get behind. As they walked, he mentioned the snack bar that used to sell tteokbokki right below the school. It was a shame it had closed just 2 weeks after she moved in. MC, munching away, asked if she had majored in battle magic. She politely asked him not to speak with his mouth full, especially in public. She confirmed that she had indeed majored in battle magic. Battles were her thing and she enjoyed them. It was the most efficient way to improve her magical abilities. By becoming a battle mage, she could constantly put her magical and decision-making skills to the test. In battle where it really mattered. With her path set on becoming a battle mage, he knew the most talented mages were those who thrived in combat, constantly testing their magical prowess and decision-making skills where it truly mattered. Even those who engaged in regular skirmishes seemed to have an edge, their abilities honed in the heat of battle. Though the idea of putting her in danger for the sake of learning wasn't appealing, it was acknowledged that dire situations could indeed help develop one's magical abilities. After all, even non-circle magic had been mastered under the pressure of life-threatening circumstances. For the time being, his watchful presence would be around to ensure her safety. The plan was to study and train magic in a controlled environment, minimizing risk while maximizing growth. Curiosity piqued, she inquired about the enigmatic non-circle magic. What was it, how did it work, and how could it pave the way to becoming an Archmage? A chuckle echoed as the promise to reveal all about non-circle magic was made. The journey to understanding this mysterious power was about to begin. Non-circle magic, he explained, was the ability to connect one's consciousness to every material and phenomenon perceivable and touchable. It was the power to transform and reconstruct them, bending the very fabric of reality to one's will. Mastery of this skill allowed one to manipulate the mass, form, and properties of their body and anything they touched. It was a power that seemed almost too incredible to be true, like something out of a fantasy tale. Skepticism crept in as she wondered how such a feat was possible without using mana. It seemed like a scam, a trick of the mind that defied all logical understanding. The explanation continued, revealing that perceiving and touching in this context meant something beyond ordinary senses. It required prerequisites that were far from simple, hinting at a depth of understanding that went beyond the surface. The first essential skill needed to perceive beyond the ordinary range of perception was none other than a scientific understanding of the structure and properties of all things in the world. It was a daunting task, but one that was necessary for mastery. The journey would start with memorizing everything in a set of books, covering topics from molecular structure and kinetics to thermodynamics. It was a challenge that would test her limits, but one that she was ready to undertake. It was just memorization, a task that shouldn't be too hard for someone of her caliber. The books covered a wide range of topics, including human anatomy and physiology, each one a piece of the puzzle that would unlock the secrets of non-circle magic. As she delved into the books, she couldn't help but wonder why human anatomy and physiology were included. The path to mastering non-circle magic was filled with mysteries, each one more intriguing than the last. As she flipped through the pages, she realized these books were not your average textbooks. They were specialized, filled with complex knowledge meant for scientists, doctors, and researchers. And to make things even more interesting, some of these books were written in different languages. But memorizing every detail of these thick books, that was something no one would ever expect. Sure, she had memorized mana structures of different elements and recipes for configuring magic circuits before, but this was way outside her field of expertise. Still, she couldn't help but wonder if 2 weeks would be enough time to tackle this monumental task. 2 weeks? As in 14 days. She couldn't believe her ears. But her mentor was sorry. He understood how eager she was to jump straight into the action. However, he didn't want her rushing through the very first step. As she looked at the books, she couldn't help but reminisce. She used to read one of these books when she was just 6 years old. Those were the days. But now, the reality of the situation was sinking in. He was serious. He genuinely thought memorizing those books should be a walk in the park. She couldn't help but wonder, was this why her father treasured him so much? Was this the difference between her and him? The gap was only too clear, but she didn't want to accept it. It took him about 3 weeks to a month to memorize them, but he thought 2 weeks should be enough, since she was his master's daughter. She couldn't help but laugh. Of course, it went without saying. She was the daughter of Archmage Zhang, the most intelligent person in the entire human race. She was about to complain that he was giving her too much time to memorize these books. But then she stopped herself. What was she saying? He liked her enthusiasm, but it was best not to rush things. As long as she faithfully followed the curriculum he designed for her, it should only take her about 27 years and 7 months to become an Archmage. 27 years. She couldn't believe it. He asked her what was the matter, but she brushed it off. It was nothing. 27 years. It set her hopes too high after seeing her teacher's ridiculously powerful branch of magic. Yeah, no one had ever managed to become an Archmage in less than 100 years. Her father said it took him a whole century and a few decades to reach his level. She thought about the time it'd take for her to become an Archmage, and the goal seemed completely out of reach. Compared to the century-long journey of becoming an Archmage, 27 years seemed like a blink. But even that felt like a stretch when someone expected her to bounce back to full power overnight. She couldn't help but wonder how long it would take to reclaim her former magical prowess. Her former level? She scoffed, as if it were some casual topic. Back in her prime, she was a top-tier sorceress, a battle mage on the verge of being promoted to the rank of mystic. No big deal, right? MC decided to play it cool, pretending he knew exactly what was being discussed. He could always look up the details later. No need to show all her cards just yet. He suggested it might be better to dive into things now rather than later, helping her get used to the idea. But what exactly were they talking about? She was still in the dark. The plan was set: get her a partner to act as a mana source, allowing her to cast spells without tapping into her own reserves. It sounded good, but the anxiety of not being able to use magic still lingered. This way, she could ease into the feeling of casting again before tackling non-circle magic. It was a step, at least, toward reclaiming what she had lost. MC recalled an accident from 14 years ago, a near-death experience that had sent him drifting through dimensions until he landed in a random, unfamiliar world. Back then, he had been in terrible shape, barely clinging to life. But he had found a way. drawing inspiration from the creatures native to that dimension to develop non-circle magic and save himself. Those creatures? Fairies, at least by classification. But what did that even mean? He wasn't entirely sure herself. Now, he was about to open an interdimensional portal to that very land. The rules were clear: never let go of the rope, don't fall asleep, and keep moving forward. With a deep breath, she steeled herself for what was to come. The journey ahead was uncertain, but she was ready, or at least, she told herself she was. As the portal began to form, she let out a sigh, the weight of the unknown pressing down on her. But there was no turning back now. The portal swirled to life, its edges crackling with energy. MC gripped the rope tightly, his knuckles turning white. The sheer absurdity of the situation hit her like a ton of bricks. This was something straight out of a fantasy novel, not her reality. And to top it all off, the guy wasn't even breaking a sweat. No mana, no incantations, just pure, raw power. It was like watching a superhero flick, but without the spandex. Opening an interdimensional portal wasn't supposed to be a one-man job. It required a dozen high-level mages, a mountain of mana, and a budget that could bankrupt a small nation. Yet here he was, making it look as easy as brewing a cup of tea. He handed her the rope, his fingers numb from the strain. She could hear his voice, calm and steady, cutting through the chaos. "Stay calm," he said. Everything would be fine as long as she held on. She shouted over the howling wind, asking if he would really take care of everything once she told him he sent her. His response was quick and reassuring. Of course, he was super close with the fairies there. In fact, they had even given him the coat he was wearing. He understood how scary this might feel and apologized for having to send her there. But he had no choice. He needed to keep the interdimensional portal open. She took a deep breath, steeling herself. Why would she be scared? He said everything would be fine. With that, she stepped through the portal. The world on the other side was a blur of colors and shapes. But one thing stood out amidst the chaos: a cup of tea, steaming and inviting. She blinked, trying to make sense of her surroundings. The air smelled of something sweet and earthy, like fresh herbs and warm bread. She was fearless, that much was clear. But whether that was a good thing or not, well, that remained to be seen. His eyes scanned the area, taking in every detail. And then a person saw him, perched on the rooftop like some brooding hero from a teen drama. He was up to something, no doubt about it. Rumors had been swirling about Zhang shutting down her company and fleeing the country after that monster defeated her in battle. It was a harsh reminder of what happened when one got arrogant and didn't make backup plans. But let's be real, there was no way he actually defeated Friedrich and made him run away. That guy was the most powerful mage in the world, and he was just some random person who thought he could take him on. Still, the urge to prove oneself stronger than Zhang was burning inside. But there was a problem: the headmaster was wanted by the association, making this whole revenge plot a bit complicated. Attacking him now would be no different from assaulting an innocent person. But innocent? That guy? Really? How many times did one have to say it? He just didn't get it because he hadn't seen that monster up close. It wasn't just his hideous appearance. His very existence was a threat to the world. That horrible thing he did could hardly be called magic. It was something that shouldn't exist in this world. Something that made sleep impossible. And it wasn't like he wanted to attack him either, but he had to make sure that innocent people never had to go through what he did. He might seem innocent now, but he was bound to bring disaster upon them all. Problematic monsters must be eradicated before they could cause trouble. It was their duty as battle mages, or so he thought. But if this Eugene guy really defeated Friedrich, they wouldn't be able to bring him down. That meant he was more powerful than a sorceress, and that was a problem. He couldn't get intimidated just because he lost to her. He only lost because he challenged Ein head-on, and that wasn't going to happen again. They had done their research on the target, and they were fully prepared to ambush him. There was always a chance to win, even if they were up against an extremely powerful mage. Sungti was called upon. His anti-restoration spell learned in Scandinavia was their best shot. He had spent a lot of money on him, and it better be good. Sungti was confident. This spell was created for capturing beasts that could restore themselves after being shredded into 100 pieces. It would surely work against any restoration spells cast by mages. The headmaster was counting on him. Everyone was to cast any enhancement spells they needed in advance and remember their positions and roles. It was time to get started, and the tension was palpable. As the team prepared, a lingering thought weighed on everyone's mind. Eugene, despite his strengths, was seen as Archmage Zhang's greatest flaw. The belief was that removing him from the equation would finally earn the Academy the recognition it deserved from the Alliance. But first, Ein had to deal with the current situation. The creatures she faced were fairies by classification, which was unexpected and raised more questions than answers. This revelation made sense of the vagueness she had encountered earlier. It was clear that there was more to the story than she had initially thought. The question on her mind now was what kind of land or fairies was she dealing with? The mystery deepened, and the tension rose. Okay, time to take a deep breath and stay calm. The organisms around were leaving barely any space, yet they weren't squeezing down. Breathing was still possible, which was a relief. Remembering the teacher's advice, never let go of the rope, don't fall asleep, and keep moving forward. It was crucial to hold on to those words. The rope was the only connection between this dimension and the original one. It would have been much easier if it had been tied around the wrist before jumping in. Keeping the head straight and moving forward was the plan. The good news was that squeezing through the organisms was possible, even if it felt gross. Ugh, it felt like walking through a massive jelly. The sensation was unpleasant, to say the least. Despite the discomfort, breathing was still possible. That was a small victory in this strange situation. But with every breath, nausea crept in, and the head was getting foggy. Why hadn't the teacher warned about any of this? It was frustrating that what was easy for the teacher wasn't for everyone else. The organisms weren't hostile, but they kept making unsettling sounds, as if mumbling to each other. It was creepy, to say the least. There was nothing to do even if they turned hostile and started attacking. The only option was to keep moving forward until the fairy the teacher mentioned showed up. The head felt like it was about to crack open from all the thoughts. But which way was forward again? The disorientation was making it hard to think straight. No, the brain wasn't working properly, and the teacher had told not to fall asleep. But staying awake was becoming a struggle. The struggle to stay awake intensified, and it felt like her body was melting away, slipping into an inevitable daze. Her senses were fading fast, and the world around him blurred. She could barely make out the words on the board as sleepiness took over. The teacher's voice echoed faintly in the background, but it was too late. She was already drifting off. A chuckle escaped him as he slipped further into his thoughts, the world around him fading away. The laughter grew louder in his mind, the absurdity of the situation hitting him. This was funny, in a weird, sleep-deprived way. He wished he could make a funny video like the ones he watched, something engaging to promote the school. But understanding what others found funny was a mystery to him. Suddenly, an explosion struck him. But he thought Ayn might know all the latest trends since she was younger. Maybe she could help him figure it out. This man is different. His mind wandered, the thoughts swirling as he drifted deeper into sleep. A sudden jolt brought him back to reality. That was close. He had almost fallen asleep in class. He looked around, confused. Where had that explosion come from? Felt so vivid yet unfamiliar. The headmaster seemed through magic at MC as he tried to regain his focus. His voice cut through the haze. "Hey Eugene, how have you been?" He blinked, trying to process the question. As Eugene struggled to process the question, he continued, revealing that they had been losing sleep over him. It was a bit dramatic, but hey, who hasn't lost sleep over a crush, right? He declared that today would be the day they finally found peace and could sleep soundly. Someone's attention was suddenly drawn to something else. Whoa, look at that thing, he thought. He had initially believed Headmaster Choi was exaggerating, but seeing it now, he finally understood what the headmaster meant. A creeping unease crawled under his skin, setting every nerve on edge. Headmaster Choi was right about this feeling. The Alliance readied their stances. Yeah, I would have been ran. Why, it's Headmaster Choi. Eugene wondered if the headmaster had been losing sleep over him. Oh dear, he thought, I can't help him with that. But why was he acting this way? Eugene thought they had cleared up the misunderstanding. A sudden realization struck Eugene, leaving him at a loss for words. Oh! Eugene confessed his confusion, admitting that he didn't understand what was happening. The conversation shifted to the complicated and tedious approval process for using certain spells. Eugene questioned the necessity of such strict regulations, arguing that they hindered the research and development of spells and inventions that could help the world. Wihyok explained that some spells, like interdimensional travel or summoning spells, could have a huge impact on the world. If mages were allowed to use such spells without approval, it would accelerate the development of magic and prove useful in dealing with certain problems. But when the potential for human malice was left unchecked and unregulated, it could grow into a bottomless pit. That's why it was necessary to establish authority and gain the recognition of people to use magic for good. Eugene wouldn't have to deal with that for now, thanks to the endorsement of an Archmage. But there might come a time when the Archmage wouldn't be able to speak for him. The person wanted Eugene to build trust and authority so everyone could feel safe about the spells he cast. But trust and authority seemed to be the last things on the headmaster's mind as he barged in, fuming about an interdimensional portal opened without permission. Eugene barely had time to process the sudden shift in atmosphere before the headmaster was already laying into him, voice booming with barely contained rage. Eugene stumbled over his words, trying to explain, but the headmaster wasn't having any of it. Eugene knew he was in deep trouble, but he also knew he couldn't just stop the spell. Not when so much was at stake. He braced himself, ready to accept whatever punishment was coming his way. But first, he needed to make the headmaster understand the gravity of the situation. The air practically crackling with the headmaster's fury. He opened his mouth to speak, to try and explain, but the headmaster cut him off with a sharp gesture, his expression dark and stormy. Eugene couldn't help but think that the headmaster looked ready to blow a gasket. He was clearly someone who held the rules in high regard, and Eugene had just broken one of the big ones. This wasn't going to be pretty. Eugene gulped, his mind racing. He really couldn't afford to have his head blown up right now, not when he was so close to figuring things out. He held up his hands, trying to calm the headmaster down. If he could just get him to listen, to hear him out, maybe there was a chance he could fix this mess. He scoffed, muttering something about young mages these days being too aggressive. Eugene couldn't help but feel a twinge of annoyance. Sure, he might have messed up, but he wasn't exactly a reckless troublemaker. He took a deep breath, pushing down his frustration. He needed to focus on restoring his body, on fixing the damage he'd caused. But before he could even start, the headmaster was already launching into another tirade. Eugene blinked, caught off guard by the sudden shift in the headmaster's tone. What was he going on about now? The headmaster was pacing now, his voice dripping with condescension. He talked about how Eugene must be rattled, how he was probably panicking. Eugene frowned, his annoyance growing. He wasn't panicking, he was trying to fix things. But the headmaster wasn't done. He went on about one of his finest disciples, someone who had gone all the way to Scandinavia to learn anti-restoration magic from their monster hunters. Eugene's frown deepened. Where was this going? The headmaster's eyes gleamed with triumph as he explained the advanced spell, how it blocked all kinds of restoration magic. Eugene's stomach dropped. That wasn't good. That wasn't good at all. Eugene's mind raced, trying to come up with a solution. He couldn't let this spell mess things up, not when he was so close to fixing everything. But then an idea struck him. This spell, it was similar to the one his master had used on him before, but simpler, less powerful. It was a spell that anyone could learn to use. And if anyone could learn it, then maybe, just maybe, he could find a way to counter it. He quickly shook off his amazement, realizing this wasn't the time to be impressed. The spell could be easily detached through non-circle magic, but his brain was already working overtime to keep the interdimensional portal open. If he paused the spell now, his hand would get detached, and the path back to this dimension would be sealed off. That would be a very, very big problem indeed. He pleaded with Headmaster Choi, sincerity in his voice, as he realized the gravity of the situation. Everyone charged at the enemy, ready to attack with maximum firepower, but he couldn't let them harm the head or hand. Headmaster shouted desperately, trying to get everyone to attack. This was getting out of hand faster than a TikTok trend. You can't kill him by chopping his body, he thought. They needed to crush him with maximum firepower, but carefully. He begged everyone to wait, just a second. Panic was setting in and he needed them to listen. Please, not the head or hand, he pleaded. The situation was critical and he was running out of time. He shouted even louder, begging them to stop for a second. The chaos was overwhelming, and he needed to regain control. Suddenly, everything went quiet. A scream echoed through the silence, breaking the tension. Something was happening and it wasn't good. Ayn rang out, glad that she had finally come around. She revealed that it had adjusted her brain without permission, forcing her to adapt and hear the interpretation of their words. She was shocked, realizing that if she dropped unconscious before adapting to this world, she would end up merging with the space around her. Still reeling from the revelation about her brain being adjusted, she was hit with another bombshell. The voice pointed out that the rope she needed to return home had slipped out of her hand. It was almost like they were reading her mind, knowing exactly what she needed. The voice continued, explaining that they had been trying to communicate with her, but she hadn't responded. They almost felt offended by her lack of response. They revealed that a child had lost her way and drifted into this world unprepared. She wondered if these were the natives of the land of the fairies. She realized that the mumbling she heard earlier was them trying to talk to her. They had been around her the whole time, but she didn't realize they were intelligent beings. She regretted judging them by their appearance. She thanked them but clarified that she wasn't lost. She revealed that it was Mr. Eugene who sent her to this world. This revelation seemed to surprise the voices. She explained that Eugene told her his friends here would help her. The voices seemed to react strongly to the name Eugene, as if it held significant meaning. The voices seemed shocked, questioning if she had just said Eugene, as in the Eugene. They wondered if Eugene really sent her here, noting that she carried a faint scent of him. They seemed to understand how she got there, but something felt off. She couldn't really tell by their reactions, but something didn't feel right. The atmosphere suddenly shifted, and she sensed a change in their demeanor. Suddenly, the voices shouted to take her away. The situation escalated quickly, leaving her confused and uncertain. The voices were insistent, repeating their command to take her away. She felt a sense of urgency and fear, not knowing what was happening. She was left in a state of confusion, trying to process everything that was happening around her. The voices seemed to be deliberating, and she waited anxiously for what would come next. She didn't know what to make of the situation. She tried to recall what he had said earlier, hoping to find a clue about what was happening. The voices questioned the idea of them being friends with Eugene. They seemed offended by the suggestion, stating that she was clearly mistaken. They continued, saying that if she knew anything about Eugene, she would know that it couldn't be true. They hinted that Eugene was something more to them, something she needed to hear for herself. After that cryptic hint about Eugene, things got even weirder. Suddenly, a voice boomed out of nowhere, announcing their arrival like some dramatic reveal. And then, silence. The voice came back, all formal and mysterious, telling whoever was listening to greet her with the utmost courtesy. It was like getting a sudden reminder to mind your manners before meeting royalty. But then it dropped a bombshell. This wasn't just any queen. This was their queen, their mother. Talk about a plot twist. The voice trailed off, leaving Ayn in stunned silence. Their queen? Their mother? The weight of those words hung heavy in the air, like the calm before a storm. You could practically hear the gears turning in Ayn's head, trying to process what this meant. Meanwhile, the headmaster was in full-on panic mode, muttering to himself about spells and severed parts not reattaching. It was like watching a scientist trying to defuse a bomb while muttering about the manual not covering this scenario. You could feel the stress radiating off him. He rambled on, explaining how his spell was working but clearly having zero clue how to handle whatever was happening. It was like watching someone try to solve a Rubik's Cube blindfolded. The tension was real, and you could tell he was way out of his depth. The headmaster's voice cracked with sheer bewilderment as he struggled to comprehend the situation. He questioned how anyone was supposed to deal with something like this, wondering if it was even possible to neutralize whatever was happening. The panic in his voice was palpable, like he was staring into the abyss of the unknown. MC managed to keep his head and right hand intact, but keeping the interdimensional portal open in that state was proving to be a challenge. It was like trying to hold a door open with one hand while juggling flaming torches with the other. Not exactly ideal. The air was thick with uncertainty as Ainz looked. You could almost hear the collective gulp as she braced for whatever came next. They couldn't understand the hesitation, urging to push past the strange sensation that seemed to hold everyone back. Eyes locked onto their target, noting the disheveled state. The attacks were clearly working, and victory seemed within reach. The anticipation was palpable, the end felt so close. Attention shifted to the mysterious hole, which was getting smaller by the second. It was a sign, damage was being dealt, and the tide of battle was turning in their favor. Determination filled the air as someone decided to take matters into their own hands. He called out to Eugene, hoping for a response, ready to finish what they started. MC was a mess, yet he refused to fight back, instead guarding that suspicious pit. It was confusing. Why protect something so strange when he was under attack? Speculation ran wild. Perhaps it was some horrible and sinister spell. The unknown was terrifying, and the imagination ran wild with possibilities. Whatever it was, it must be important. He could have used a nasty transformation spell to fight back, but instead he was guarding that hole. It was a puzzle, a mystery that needed solving. The very existence of the enemy was terrifying, a fact that was known all too well. People could sense the evil instinctively, and it sent shivers down spines. But now it was time to put an end to the anxiety and terror. There was a score to settle, a humiliation to avenge. The plan was to capture and bring him to the Alliance's tribunal. MC called out to Headmaster Choi, questioning, uncertain. There were no excuses to be made. The wrongdoing was fully acknowledged, and the weight of it was heavy on the heart. Punishment was accepted, but a plea for time was made. The future was uncertain, and the path ahead was shrouded in mystery. A desperate plea to get her out echoed through the chaos, but it was met with confusion and fear. What was being conjured, and why did it feel so wrong? The tricks had gone on long enough. Frustration boiled over as the headmaster declared he'd had enough, the words hanging heavy in the air. A sense of finality washed over the scene. It was over, or so it seemed, but the tension was far from gone. But something wasn't right. The spell should have been broken, yet the confusion lingered. The realization hit hard. He had chopped him up before, but this time was different. Something had changed, and it wasn't for the better. A pang of guilt washed over him. MC felt bad for causing more trouble for Headmaster Choi, but he knew he had to push himself further. With a deep breath, he prepared to stretch his limits, ready to face whatever came next. Understanding dawned as the pieces fell into place. So it was Eugene who had sent her here. The plot thickened, and the mystery deepened. The creature before her was massive, unlike anything she had ever seen. The voice softened, calling her child, but the tension remained. The question hung in the air, heavy with implication. Was she Eugene's daughter? The answer was uncertain, and the stakes were high. Confusion and denial filled the air. What had given her that idea? She wasn't Eugene's daughter, just his student. But the explanation only led to more questions. Curiosity piqued as the scent of Eugene clung to her. It was a mystery, a puzzle that needed solving. And as the pieces fell into place, the truth began to reveal itself. But the revelation brought more questions than answers. Friends? Was that really the word Eugene used to describe their relationship? It seemed too simple, too mundane for the weight of their shared experiences. A friend? The thought echoed, laced with disbelief. After everything he had done, the sacrifices made, the battles fought, how could he think of himself as just a friend? The faces around her were unreadable, but their body language spoke volumes. They didn't share his sentiment. Eugene must have done something to anger them, but he seemed clueless about it. And to make matters worse, he had sent her to a dimension full of hostile creatures. She couldn't believe it. But then, she corrected herself. Eugene was their savior, a hero unlike any other. A savior, the likes of whom they would never see again. The words hung in the air, heavy with reverence. She couldn't help but wonder, what exactly had Eugene done to earn such gratitude? Friendship fell utterly short of the feelings one would have about a savior who risked his life to save this world. It was closer to boundless gratitude and reverence. And as his student, she was their most honored guest. She was officially welcomed to this realm, a place she never imagined she would be. The warmth and kindness were overwhelming, a stark contrast to the hostility she had initially encountered. She was invited to sit, to make herself comfortable. The kindness was almost too much, but she managed a thankful stammer, still processing the sudden change in treatment. It was a shame Eugene couldn't join her there. He must be terribly busy helping others in her world as well. She wondered how he was doing, and the response was a warm chuckle. Quite well, she said. They would have given her a royal treatment if they had known it was Eugene who sent her. The debt they owed him was one they could never hope to repay. The overwhelming kindness continued, and she couldn't help but wonder why. What exactly had Eugene done for them to warrant such treatment? As a student of Eugene, they wanted to know why she was there, what had brought her to them. The questions were gentle but probing, and she felt a mix of relief and apprehension. She explained her situation, how she had been able to use magic before, but due to certain circumstances, she couldn't anymore. Her teacher, Mr. Eugene, had told her she might find help here. If she told them that Eugene had sent her, would they help? She mentioned the curious little skill Eugene had created based on their characteristics. The room seemed to hum with interest. Very well, they said. They would send one of their children with her to help in her world. With their help and Eugene's, her problem should be solved. The promise hung in the air, a beacon of hope in her tumultuous journey. With a promise of help still echoing in her mind, she barely had time to express her gratitude before the air filled with a chorus of eager voices. The fairies, each one more enthusiastic than the last, clamored to be chosen, their excitement palpable. They all wanted to go with her, to see Eugene's world, and to be of assistance. The fairies' eagerness knew no bounds. Each one shouted over the other, promising their unique abilities and unwavering dedication. They were ready to do anything to be by Eugene's side and experience his world firsthand. The sheer enthusiasm was overwhelming, a testament to the admiration they held for him. Amidst the chaos, she couldn't help but notice the fairies' fixation on her teacher. It was almost comical how starstruck they were, practically treating him like a celebrity. Their interest in seeing him seemed to overshadow their initial promise to help her, which was somewhat disheartening. She realized that these fairies were the inspiration behind her teacher's non-circle magic. Fairy-based spells were extremely rare, but each one was highly effective and potent. Every fairy present looked powerful in their own right, and their abilities would prove quite useful until she regained her magical powers. They might not have been the prettiest sight, but she was willing to put up with that if it meant she could use magic again. The thought of regaining her abilities, even through unconventional means, was enough to make her overlook their appearances. With a deep breath, she prepared to make her choice. The fairies' eager faces looked up at her, their excitement almost tangible. Suddenly, a voice called out, catching everyone's attention. It was Eugene, his voice urgent and strained. He needed her to hurry back, trouble brewing on their side. The message was clear, and the fairy's chatter died down as the weight of the situation settled in. She couldn't help but question the bizarre sight of Eugene's disembodied mouth and eyeballs. What kind of trouble was he talking about? He explained that he had been watching a video while keeping the interdimensional portal open for her. A casual activity amidst the chaos. The fairy's excitement reached a fever pitch as they recognized Eugene. It was indeed him, and they couldn't contain their joy. Greetings and well wishes filled the air. And Ayn couldn't help but comment on the perks of being a celebrity like her beloved teacher. The queen asked how he liked the coat they had given her. He gushed about how much he loved it, wearing it all the time because it looked great on him and fit perfectly. The fairies missed him dearly and wished he would drop by sometime. He apologized for not being in touch for a long time and expressed his desire to visit them properly. However, for now, he had to take one of the fairies and hurry back to his world. The fairies were taken aback by the suddenness of his departure. She hadn't even chosen whom to take with her yet, but the fairies assured her that it wouldn't be necessary. Their confidence was puzzling, but there was no time to dwell on it. One fairy stepped forward, offering itself to go with her. The sudden volunteer left her momentarily speechless, her mind racing with the implications of this unexpected turn of events. As she stood there, stunned by the fairy's unexpected offer, she couldn't help but wonder if this was really happening. The weight of the moment left her questioning everything. The urgency in the air was palpable as MC let out a nervous giggle. They needed to hurry, but there was a promise to return and express their gratitude properly next time. Amidst the flurry of goodbyes, voices echoed with promises to visit again and farewells filled with hope and anticipation. A sense of doubt crept in as someone questioned their mother's decision, feeling a mix of guilt and concern. They wondered if they should have gone instead, feeling the weight of responsibility. Despite the oddness of the situation, there was a deep respect for Eugene's decision, acknowledging the uniqueness of the circumstances. It was a moment of reflection, recognizing the true nature of someone's character and the depth of their personality. There was a hopeful wish that the whims of fate would bring strength and reliability to those involved, fostering a bond that could be depended on. Panic set in as someone noticed a strange change in their hands, a sudden and unexpected transformation that left them shocked and confused. Trying to stay calm, they reassured themselves that at least there was no pain, but the suspicion lingered that someone had planned this all along. The realization hit hard that the anti-restoration spell had long worn off, and none of their attack spells seemed to work anymore, leaving them vulnerable and exposed. The frustration was evident as they acknowledged the overwhelming strength of their opponent, feeling helpless and outmatched. Questions arose about the true nature of their foe, wondering if he was even human at all. Regret filled the air as Headmaster admitted his mistake in challenging a foe they couldn't handle, putting their disciples in danger due to his own fears and insecurities. As the weight of regret still hung in the air, a sudden urgency cut through the tension. Someone called out for Headmaster Choi, their voice echoing with concern. They had come to check on the situation, sensing that things were spiraling out of control. The group froze in shock as their eyes landed on something utterly unexpected. The sight before them was so unsettling that it sent a chill down their spines. This was clearly something they shouldn't have messed with. Determination flashed in Headmaster's eyes as he declared his plan to rescue their captured mages. He urged the others to channel their mana into a powerful second circle spell, a risky move that left everyone stunned. Taking full responsibility, they insisted on proceeding with the spell despite the hesitation. The weight of the decision hung heavy in the air, but no one dared to object. A heartfelt apology escaped their lips as they acknowledged the gravity of the situation. They couldn't help but feel responsible for the mess they were all in. They admitted their foolishness and stubbornness had led them all into this perilous situation. The raw honesty of their words hung heavy in the air. A brief moment of silence passed as the group processed the apology. The tension was palpable, but there was no time to dwell on it. They had to focus on the task at hand. With a sudden burst of energy, they declared that their captured friends were now free. Urging everyone to stay back and take cover, they prepared for the next move. A command rang out, ordering everyone to get down and create a barrier if possible. The urgency in their voice was clear as they called out for Headmaster Choi once again. They admitted that their plan might not be enough to defeat the enemy but hoped it would at least seal him off, even if only for a brief moment. The tension was high as everyone braced for impact. A loud scream echoed through the air as the spell was cast. The sheer force of the magic sent shockwaves through the room, leaving everyone on edge. A pained grunt followed as Ayn was sent flying by the impact. The force of the collision was intense, and it was clear that this battle was far from over. A groan of frustration escaped her lips as she struggled to get back up. She couldn't help but complain about not being warned about the bizarre place she had been sent to. An apology was quickly offered, acknowledging the shock of the unfamiliar sights she had encountered. But nothing compared to the sheer disbelief of seeing her teacher in such a state. Still reeling from the shock, the group couldn't help but wonder what the rush was all about. Before they could process anything else, someone noticed Zhang standing there, looking just as confused as they were. The last person she expected to see was standing right in front of her. The shock was palpable as they all exclaimed, "Headmaster Choi!" This was not the reunion anyone had anticipated. Questions flew out in rapid succession. Wasn't she supposed to be abroad? Why was she with Eugene of all people? And what was he doing there? The confusion was mutual, with Headmaster Choi looking just as bewildered. MC took a deep breath, realizing he had a lot of explaining to do. He needed to clear up the confusion and give them the answers they desperately sought. He started by revealing that Ain had lost her mana, rendering her unable to use magic anymore. The news hit them hard, and they struggled to process the implications. But MC wasn't done. He explained that he had Ain enroll in his school to teach her non-circle magic, a form of magic anyone could use without mana. Ain was taken aback, struggling to keep up with the revelations. Before they could fully digest this, he dropped another bombshell. Ain had been in a rush to use her magic again, so he sent her into a dimension he used to live in, where she could get the help of the fairies there. He admitted he had totally forgotten that opening interdimensional portals was regulated by magic authorities. The group was left speechless, their minds racing to keep up with the unfolding story. Suddenly, MC looked exhausted. He admitted he had overdone it and was feeling sleepy. The tension in the room was palpable as they all wondered what would happen next. Silence filled the room as Headmaster Choi's eyes began to droop. The group exchanged worried glances, unsure of what to do next. Suddenly, KM's loud voice echoed through the room. "Mr. Eugene." They had received reports about a huge commotion in the building. The group snapped to attention, their hearts pounding with a mix of fear and anticipation. Everyone looked around, trying to make sense of the chaos. What was going on here? The question hung in the air, unanswered. A heavy sigh filled the room, echoing the collective exhaustion and confusion. They all needed a moment to process everything that had just happened. Ain finally broke the silence, exclaiming in frustration, "For crying out loud, this was all getting to be too much." The emotional weight of the situation was taking its toll on everyone. The emotional weight of the situation was taking its toll on everyone. The air was thick with tension, and it felt like the silence itself might shatter from the pressure. Ain cut through the silence, sharp and direct. It was clear someone had been waiting for this moment, and now that it had arrived, there was no time to waste. The tone suggested urgency, as if every second counted. She continued, frustration seeping into every word. It was clear that the arguing had been going on for far too long, and it was starting to wear on everyone involved. The mention of Detective Kim added a layer of gravity to the situation, as if her presence alone could change the course of events. A request for a moment of privacy was made, and it was granted without hesitation. The tone suggested that whatever was about to be discussed needed to be kept between just a few people, adding an air of secrecy to the scene. The conversation took a turn as Headmaster admitted to acting on a gut feeling, despite the lack of evidence. The confidence in his intuition was palpable, but it was quickly interrupted by a sudden outburst of shock, as if something unexpected had just been revealed. Concern was voiced for Eugene, but the words were cut short, as if whatever was happening was too overwhelming to put into words. Then, a surprising declaration was made. MC was turning himself in, adding a dramatic twist to the unfolding events. The room fell into a stunned silence, punctuated only by a few nervous, disbelieving sounds. It was clear that no one had seen this coming, and the shock was written all over their faces. He continued, admitting to the unauthorized use of interdimensional portals. He accepted full responsibility, as if the weight of his actions had finally caught up with him. The confession hung heavy in the air, leaving everyone to process what this meant. A tense silence followed, filled with unspoken questions and disbelief. It was one of those moments where time seemed to stand still, and no one quite knew how to react. The confusion was evident, and it added another layer of complexity to the already tense situation. A stern voice cut through, reminding everyone that as mages, they were supposed to set an example. The tone was firm, almost scolding, as if they were trying to bring some order to the chaos. The lecture continued, emphasizing that no matter how shocking someone's appearance might be, it was never an excuse for violence. The words were heavy with disappointment, as if the speaker was trying to drive home a crucial lesson in the midst of the turmoil. The lecture's heavy words still hung in the air, but the mood quickly shifted as Kim pointed out that Mr. Eugene couldn't be harmed by such attacks anyway. The officers weren't having it, though. They fired back, accusing the headmaster of thinking they could ignore local laws just because the Magic Alliance might intervene. The charges were serious aggravated assault, attempted murder. They even threatened to tarnish his academy record with a criminal history. The headmaster tried to justify their actions, appealing to the officers' sense of duty. They claimed that Mr. Eugene wasn't human at all, but a dangerous monster. As battle mages, they argued, wasn't it their responsibility to protect innocent lives from such a threat? The officers weren't buying it, though. They shot back, saying that detectives relied on their intuition too. They accused Kim of not knowing how harmless Mr. Eugene had been pretending to be around them. Suddenly a flashback, Mr. Eugene himself chimed in, thanking the officers for their hard work day and night to keep people safe. He suggested that they must be terribly exhausted, which might explain why they were mistaking a civilian for a criminal and opening fire. In an attempt to lighten the mood, Mr. Eugene mentioned that he had picked up some lattes on the way. He casually added that he had also captured a criminal wanted for magical crimes and asked where he should put him. The officers weren't amused by the change of subject, though. They tried to steer the conversation back on track, asking Mr. Eugene what he would like them to do and confirming his intentions. It seemed like the officers were ready to arrest everyone on the spot if Mr. Eugene confirmed their suspicions. Mr. Eugene fell silent for a moment, seemingly deep in thought. The weight of the situation seemed to hit him as he realized that it was his appearance that had caused all this trouble. The silence was palpable, and everyone waited for Mr. Eugene's next move. Suddenly, Mr. Eugene let out a chortle, catching everyone off guard. The officers exchanged confused glances, wondering what was going on. Mr. Eugene couldn't contain his laughter any longer. He apologized, saying that this had never happened to him before. The officers were left even more confused, wondering what was so funny about the situation. After his laughter subsided, Mr. Eugene admitted that the situation felt quite awkward. He reassured everyone that it was okay and asked for the officers to let them go, leaving everyone in shock. He acknowledged that his actions might have caused a misunderstanding and could see why Headmaster Choi felt threatened. He realized that his appearance was what bothered Headmaster Choi, which caused a reaction from the crowd. He told Headmaster Choi to relax and not feel threatened by his looks, even complimenting the headmaster's handsomeness. He joked that students these days aren't that shallow and won't transfer schools just to study under a handsome teacher, adding that Headmaster Choi looked stylish enough to have confidence, leaving everyone confused. He suggested they exchange numbers, which shocked Headmaster Choi. He mentioned that despite their misunderstandings, it brought them together and proposed they stay in touch to help each other, given they are in the same line of work. He expressed excitement about sharing advice on teaching students and running the school, then casually mentioned he was straight, leaving Headmaster Choi bewildered. Someone addressed Mage Ain, then corrected themselves, realizing she wasn't a mage anymore. He mentioned hearing about Ain going abroad to rest after a fierce battle against Friedrich, questioning if this place was really overseas. He sarcastically asked if Ain tried to take on Eugene by herself after refusing their offer and lost her ability to use magic in the process, questioning if Eugene threatened her into enrolling there. He wondered what exactly Mr. Eugene would be teaching her, suggesting it might be manners before teaching his strange spells. He pondered what would happen once word gets out that Ain is in the country and unable to use magic, emphasizing the word teach. He mentioned that these men were saying they want to take Headmaster Choi's classes, which shocked and confused everyone. And off they go. The tension builds with the fear that those who know too much won't keep their mouths shut, and soon, the place will be swarming with trouble. Exhaustion sets in as the weight of the day's events takes its toll. It had been quite the ordeal, and the problems seemed to be growing bigger and bigger, leaving everyone feeling drained and overwhelmed. Reflecting on the chaos that unfolded, there was a sense of missed opportunities. There were important things that needed to be shared, but the moment had passed, leaving a lingering sense of unfinished business. As the dust settles, the biggest problem of them all looms large, casting a shadow over everything else. The tension reaches a boiling point as accusations fly. The blame is placed squarely on loose lips, with a sharp rebuke that the mouth is the problem, causing a startled reaction. Frustration erupts as the volume rises, questioning why the whole city had to know about it. It had only been a few hours since the reminder to keep quiet, but the secret was out, and the big mouth was once again the problem, especially since it was spilled to the wrong person. Defenses go up as an attempt is made to explain the situation, claiming it was all a misunderstanding. But the damage was done, and trust was broken, especially since the person involved had ulterior motives. Confusion sets in as the conversation takes a turn, with mentions of teaming up and wrecking things. But before any clarity can be reached, the topic is dropped, leaving more questions than answers. Exhaustion takes over, and plans are made to meet for lunch the next day. There's somewhere to be in the morning, so rest is needed. Agreements are made to see each other the following afternoon. The decision is made to wait until tomorrow to share the news about the gifts received from the queen in the land of the fairies. The anticipation builds as the story waits to be told. Reflecting on the day's events, there's a sense of accomplishment as MC finally gets to enroll in school. The journey had been long, but the goal was achieved. A new friendship is formed, and there's a promise to keep in touch often. The day ends on a hopeful note, with plans to call and catch up in the future. A moment of silence follows, as the weight of the day's events settles in. The scene is quiet, but the emotions run deep. Frustration and humiliation boil over as the reality of the situation sets in. The blame is placed squarely on someone else, and the humiliation of the secret being out in the open is almost too much to bear. The question lingers, how did things turn out so horribly all of a sudden? Reeling from the humiliation, doubts started to creep in. Could Mr. Eugene really be trusted? And when would they finally be sent home? They had been abducted, yet they still did as asked and operated on Friedrich. There was no reason for them to be there anymore. No one had told them anything either. Desperation set in as they turned to the doc, who used to be close with Archmage Zhang. Couldn't the doc call him and ask for help? What had they created? It wasn't just about his ridiculous magic or that horrifying face. It felt creepy, as if they were looking at something that shouldn't exist in this world. They reminisced about the time they assassinated the Demon King together. As intimidating as he was, his presence didn't feel as disturbing as this. Medical mages were hard to come by. It took a lot of effort to train an assistant and make him useful. But this man was a terrorist. He had a habit of mouthing off, and saving lives was the priority, but at what cost? Finally, they were being taken back to their homes. The thought of proper coffee was a relief. But first, there was one more question to answer. He claimed to be his disciple. Was it true? Of course, he was the most outstanding disciple he had ever had and would ever have in his life. He had gone to see him that morning. It was clear why he was so rattled by him. He had managed to survive in a remarkably inventive way. He really shouldn't exist in this world. He had somehow forced himself to stay alive without using necromancy or the dark arts. But what happened if you did that? But the consequences of his unnatural existence were severe. Civilians would feel an instinctive dread, their stomachs churning with unease just by being near him. Battle mages, trained for combat, might even attack him on sight, their survival instincts overriding all reason. And if someone were to fight him, sustaining hostility for an extended period, the effects would only grow worse. His mere presence would distort judgment, triggering primal survival instincts in those around him. Talk about a cursed monster. Anyway, that was certainly a new experience. It gave him some perspective. Thanks to that, he was able to change some of his old views. And it helped him come up with an idea beyond his wildest imagination. Creek. Wihyok could look forward to it. He would be making his declaration of war. It would mark the beginning of a new era that neither mages nor non-mages would ever forget. Oh, that bastard, he hung up. Then they could get started. He pretended to be so nice and generous to others, but he was always rude to him, sulking about the fact that he forgot to show respect to him a century ago. This wasn't an easy spell to cast, and he would appreciate it if the grumbling and distractions could stop. Except for one missing member, namely Linus, everyone in the Zodiac was ready. Good, he knew they were all busy with the tasks he had given them, but there was something he must tell them in person. To this day, they had been working tirelessly to destroy the suffocating little circus Wihyok had created on Earth, and to create a world where mages would use magic to rule over others as they should. He was to be killed, so their goal was to carry out the plan flawlessly so he wouldn't be able to do anything about it. But lately, he had experienced something remarkably new. He paid a heavy price for it, but it made him realize how the world had changed and how humble their objectives had been. The weight of his sacrifice lingered, but it had opened his eyes. The world had changed, and so had he. It was time to dream bigger, to be bolder, because now they could. And what better way to start than by taking down Wihyok? But first, a meeting was in order. The group gathered, though not without complaints. Someone grumbled about how a video conference would have sufficed, while others questioned the necessity of such a dramatic gathering. The idea of taking down an Archmage seemed absurd, almost laughable. It was one thing to undermine his reputation, but to literally kill him, that was a whole other level of crazy. Yet, despite the initial skepticism, curiosity piqued. If there was a way to actually pull this off, did that mean he had the means to do it now? And more importantly, was he going to share his plan with the rest of them? The implications were massive. If they could really take down an Archmage, the alliance would no longer be a problem. The very thought sent a ripple of excitement through the group. The Archmages in the alliance were already on shaky ground. They were basically walking corpses. All they needed to do was get rid of Zhang, the most active and nosiest of them all. Once he was gone, Zodiac's era would finally come to an end. A new era would begin, one where they could finally take control. Friedrich pondered the words. His era, they said. The thought was intoxicating. He had once dreamed of a world where mages ruled with power, but now it seemed like more than just a dream. But as he thought about it, he realized that his goal had only been a compromise for existence. It was time to aim higher, to reach for something greater. With Wihiok out of the picture, they would be free to do whatever they wanted. They could take as much as they desired and do as much damage as they pleased. The promise hung in the air, heavy with anticipation. Archmage Zhong's sickening and revolting dream would never threaten their choices or their future again. The thought was liberating, almost exhilarating. The tension was palpable, the excitement almost too much to bear. They were on the brink of something great, something that would change everything. But amidst the excitement, there was a hint of frustration. He just couldn't stand the thought of Zhong still being the same as he was before. Someone pointed out that her father had spoiled her by being too lenient. But it didn't matter. She wasn't going to change, and that was something they would have to deal with. Sticking to her ways, she knew his perception-blocking spell wasn't foolproof. If someone really wanted to find her, they could spot her from far away. And sure enough, someone did. Curious about her heart's condition, she decided to ask Cecilia for her opinion, since Mr. Eugene had already given her assurance. Cecilia examined it thoroughly and found that, despite its adorable deformed shape, it should function perfectly fine. In fact, it was in great condition. But she wasn't so sure. She wondered if it could really be called top condition when there wasn't a trace of mana left in her heart anymore. Cecilia reassured her that physiologically, it was in great shape. She couldn't help but marvel at Eugene's work. After being missing for a decade, Eugene had returned with a spell that could separate the tangled mess of mana crystals from the neural network and completely restore her heart's function. Eugene had developed a branch of magic that didn't require any mana, calling it non-circle magic. He had promised to teach it to her, and that was what she would be learning starting today. She couldn't believe it. Even though Friedrich's bones and flesh were all mangled together, his nerves and blood vessels were functioning just fine. That must have been Eugene's work as well. She was amazed. Non-circle magic that didn't use any mana? She would have said Eugene was pulling her leg, but the proof was right there in her restored heart. She had a rough time thanks to that, but she was grateful for Eugene's work. It was truly a miracle. She wondered what she should do with the heart mana stabilizers she had been taking. Cecilia told her she could throw them away and indulge in coffee, alcohol, and cigarettes as much as she liked. Ayn was taken aback. As a doctor, why was she encouraging things like that? She didn't even like coffee, but she insisted she try the good stuff. She chuckled. Sure. She'd reach out if anything came up and try to avoid causing any problems. But first, she'd have to find some good coffee beans. With a new lease on life and a heart full of possibilities, she stepped forward, ready to embrace whatever came next. But as fate would have it, her heart was fine, a miracle in itself. Yet, lurking in the shadows of her brain was something peculiar, something that wasn't a tumor but had burrowed deep within. It should have been causing havoc, but she was fine, baffling everyone around her. The medical team was stumped, scratching their heads as they wondered how she could be completely fine with such an anomaly. And just when they thought it couldn't get any weirder, another patient rolled in. Exhausted and defeated, the doctor threw her hands up, attributing the mystery to Eugene's handiwork during the heart transplant. With a sigh, she declared the aftercare complete, ready to move on to the next baffling case. The next patient was called in, and the doctor braced herself for another round of medical mysteries. Shifting gears, the focus turned to classifying crystal systems, a task that seemed mundane compared to the morning's medical drama. A rapid-fire quiz began, with questions about hexagonal crystal systems and their metallic elements. The answers came swiftly, precise, and accurate, showcasing a deep understanding of the subject. The interrogation continued, delving into molecular geometry and bond angles. Despite the complexity, the responses were spot on. But a lingering question remained: was all this really necessary for learning non-circle magic? The answer was a resounding yes. MC was impressed, acknowledging that while the questions were basic, tricky ones had been thrown in to test the student's mettle, and she had passed with flying colors. Ayn brushed it off, claiming it was just basic stuff, easily mastered by skimming through the book before bed. It seemed like her study habits were as impressive as her test scores. He praised the approach, emphasizing the importance of studying before sleep and getting a full 7 to 8 hours of rest. It was clear she knew her stuff both in magic and study habits. He explained that information received 1 or 2 hours before sleep had a high chance of being stored in long-term memory, making it a crucial time for learning. And once sufficient sleep was achieved, the brain would be clear of all the accumulated adenosine, ready for a new day of learning. In the first 2 hours after waking up, the brain's logical reasoning ability would be at its sharpest. This golden window was the best time to review and understand complex concepts, a tip he was eager to share. He cautioned against wasting this precious time scrolling online, urging his future students to make the most of their brain's golden window. It was a lesson in magic and life, delivered with a touch of humor and a lot of wisdom. With the instructor's wisdom still echoing, the scene shifted to a more personal reflection. Everything he said was true, and she knew he was pretty smart, taking after her father. But even with all that intelligence, she couldn't recall being this sharp, not even in her teenage years. A mild throbbing in her head had been persistent ever since she came out of the interdimensional portal yesterday. It was likely due to all the trouble her teacher put them through. It almost felt as if there was a second brain in her head. Then, a sudden realization hit her. The queen had planted something in her head yesterday. How could she have forgotten about that? It was a crucial detail that suddenly came rushing back. MC was about to take a look at it, but it seemed like it should have been done yesterday. It was a big issue, and she was feeling tired. She was asked to sit down and relax. He was going to take a good look at it, asking her to sit still and try to relax. It was hardly a surprise, given how her heart had been ripped out and squeezed to crush the crystals the other time. As he examined, a sense of wonder filled the air. He had never gotten to see this before because he could never time it right. But this time, he couldn't believe they actually got to see it. The little one was about to hatch. Hatch! That wasn't what she wanted to hear from someone who had just opened up her skull to look at her brain. He better close her head back up without taking it out. It was a big issue, and she was feeling tired. The queen had entrusted her with her heir, which was a huge responsibility. She must have won over the queen's heart in the land of the fairies. The queen's heir was much more incredible than the other fairies, and he was excited to see what would happen next. The queen of the fairies was massive and had such an imposing presence that even a dragon would think twice before challenging her to a battle. She probably had other mysterious powers as well. If she could control her heir, she might not have to wait 27 years to become an Archmage. Who knows? She might make it within a year. The anticipation was building, and she couldn't wait to see what would happen next. A sudden sound filled the air, and she couldn't help but wonder what was happening. It was a moment of suspense and excitement. A sudden pain shot through her head, and she couldn't help but wonder what had happened. Had it hatched? She felt dizzy for a second but quickly recovered, ready to face whatever came next. As the dizziness faded, her eyes widened in disbelief. She couldn't believe what they were seeing. It was incredible, almost too good to be true. She turned to her mentor, seeking confirmation, hoping for an explanation. He chuckled, understanding her astonishment. It was indeed more impressive than it looked, and it promised to deliver everything she had hoped for, from mastering non-circle magic to casting spells with ease. They marveled at the sight before them, finding it almost adorable. It was hard to believe that something so small could hold so much potential. She turned to her mentor once more, seeking reassurance. Her mentor, however, was less certain. This fairy was still an infant, and the fairy queen herself was quite different from others. It was hard to predict how things would turn out. They wondered how long it would take for the fairy to grow, even to a fraction of the queen's size. Fairies took about 3,000 years to reach adulthood, and the queen had likely been around for tens of thousands of years. They were sure they would find out more as they started raising the fairy. There must have been a good reason for sending this particular one. Still, they couldn't help but feel uncertain. They hadn't gone there to adopt a pet, and they weren't sure they were ready for this responsibility. Putting their concerns aside for the moment, Friedrich called everyone together to share their plans. He wanted everyone to put their heads together and get creative, to think of new projects they could try once Wihiak was gone. As the meeting wrapped up, someone asked if they could leave. They needed to finish up some work before heading home. A snarky remark about the meal being like cattle feed was met with a dismissive response to get lost. Managing their businesses these days wasn't easy, especially with the Alliance trying to win points for their performance review. Before everyone left, they were asked to put a photo on the screen. The screen flickered to life, displaying the photo. The room fell silent as everyone took in the image. Murmurs of discomfort filled the room. It was unpleasant, and they couldn't help but question the old man's taste. Why even serve a meal if he was going to show them this? Someone suggested taking the old man's phone away. One person spoke up, saying they had seen the man in the photo before. He had destroyed some of their subcontractors' magic material processing plants. They had been thinking of either getting rid of him or recruiting him if he could be won over. As the group mulled over the idea of dealing with the mysterious man, someone tried to recall his name, throwing out Eugene as a possibility. Another chimed in with a rumor that he might be Wihiak's disciple, but the idea was quickly dismissed. The tension in the room thickened as they all wondered if this Eugene was the same man who had caused so much destruction. Fried voice cut through the chatter, warning everyone to stay clear of him. If anyone ever ran into him, they were told to just leave. This was a warning to all of them. A serious tone in the voice that left no room for argument. Someone scoffed, saying there was no need to warn them. Why would anyone want to see a face like that? Another voice piped up, asking if he was an acquaintance of Fried. The room was filled with a mix of curiosity and dread. He confirmed that the destruction they had seen was indeed his work. He revealed that he had only managed to escape after tearing out his own heart, leaving everyone shocked. That was why Leo wasn't present today, adding a grim weight to the conversation. One person connected the dots, realizing that explained why Linus wasn't there either. The room erupted into a mix of laughter and disbelief, someone commenting on how messed up it was to sacrifice his own son. The atmosphere was a blend of dark humor and growing unease. Another voice chimed in, mentioning a ridiculous rumor that the speaker had run away from Wihiok's daughter. The room buzzed with whispers, someone commenting that he had grown soft. The tension was palpable, the old man's reputation seemingly crumbling before their eyes. Someone else pointed out that back in the day, he would have gone ballistic and insisted on setting the record straight. They knew something was up when he didn't do anything about it. The room was filled with a mix of concern and disbelief, someone asking if he had finally met his match, if the man had scared him that much. The old man simply replied with a quiet yeah, leaving the room in stunned silence. The weight of his admission hung heavy in the air, everyone waiting for him to continue. He finally broke the silence, admitting that even though he was practically unarmed, he had never felt so overwhelmed by an enemy before. With 100 years of battles under his belt, he had never faced anyone like him. The room was left in awe, the reality of the situation sinking in. He continued, saying he would have probably lost if he had kept fighting out of ego. There was a sense of vulnerability in his voice, something the others had never heard before. It was weird, and the room was left in stunned silence. Someone finally broke the silence, saying it should be a joke, but it didn't sound like one at all. Another voice chimed in, asking what was wrong with him. He used to talk about killing Archmage Zhang, but now he seemed like a different person entirely. The voice cut through the tension, asking if he was really the Friedrich Gamara they knew. He wasn't exactly a reckless warlord, but he used to have the confidence of the strongest battle mage in the world. They used to find that sexy, but now he was starting to look really pathetic. The final blow came when someone said they didn't pledge their soul to him to serve a coward like this. The room was left in a heavy silence, the weight of the words hanging in the air. The once great Friedrich Gamara seemed to have fallen from grace, leaving everyone to wonder what had truly happened to him. As the silence lingered, the voice cut through the tension, declaring that if Friedrich was going to disappoint, he might as well hand over his seat as Capricorn and leave. The fallen king's grip on his position was slipping, and everyone could feel it. Suddenly, a swift movement cut through the tension. A figure zoomed in, protesting that the move was unfair. The atmosphere shifted from heavy silence to a burst of action. The newcomer questioned if anyone really thought they could crack Friedrich's head open, revealing that they hadn't even used mana behind the kick. But the kick would have still smashed his head open if they hadn't held back. The figure complained that their counterattack wasn't even stopped, wondering why they were being so mean. A warning was issued to move a foot or it would get cut off. The figure was advised to disengage as well, as it was a waste of mana. The tension in the room was palpable, as she let out a sigh. A dismissive TSK echoed through the room, directed at the old man. Her attention then shifted, a simple hey hanging in the air. The old man was asked what he wanted. A bet was proposed to kill Eugene and bring him there, and the old man's seat as Capricorn would be given up. The offer hung in the air, the old man's seat as Capricorn and his service on the line. The stakes had never been higher. A heavy silence filled the room as everyone considered the proposal, the weight of the decision pressing down on them. She broke the silence, addressing the old man with a mix of amusement and challenge, questioning if he was betting that they couldn't murder Eugene. The tension in the room escalated as she leaned in, dead serious, declaring this was no joke to her. The old man, unfazed, simply responded with a cool, let's do it, leaving everyone on the edge of their seats. And just like that, the screen faded to black with a dramatic, to be continued, leaving us all screaming at our screens, no way, not now.